On a rubble-strewn street, a tense standoff unfolds. A group stands defiant amidst the destruction, ready to protect their domain. From the opposing side, a lone figure observes them, wondering what to make of this strange assembly and their declaration to allow no one to pass. Within that group, the witch Mina turns to the elf warrior Adele with a cheerful, yet menacing, grin. She suggests they simply mince their opponents, a proposal that hangs in the air as Adele maintains her stoic, determined expression. The observer's face, cast in shadow, hardens with resolve. He gives his silent consent for them to do as they please, his own purpose clear. This was the beginning of his quest, to manage a powerful domain with the help of these rare and formidable allies. The memory shifts back several years. A young boy, sitting comfortably in a well-appointed room, smiles as he reads a large book. This was Adele, the son of the lord of the Riedrich domain, blissfully unaware of the future. He turned a page, fully absorbed. He understood that as the future lord, it was his duty to learn everything about his own lands and the neighboring countries. His current focus was a map of the regions surrounding Riedrich. His finger traced the lines on the page, identifying the territories. There was the Ard's Kingdom, the Randhill border territory, and to the side, the Earldom of Major. As he stared at the map, a strange feeling surfaced. He recognized all of the place names, a sense of deep familiarity that made no sense. He was certain he had never seen this map before in his life. Then, the truth struck him like lightning. An image flooded his mind, a memory from another life, of sitting before a screen, playing a game called Ard's Miracle. The map was from that game. In that instant, he understood. He had been reincarnated into the world of a game he used to play. His initial amazement that reincarnation was real quickly soured into dread. He recalled the protagonist of the game, a character named Ardiz, and realized with a jolt that the hero looked nothing like him. A glance at his own reflection confirmed the terrifying discrepancy. A chilling question echoed in his mind. Who had he become? He searched his memories of the game, but the name Adele was nowhere to be found. Such a character had never existed, neither as an ally nor as an enemy. He racked his brain. While he didn't recognize the name Adele, the name of the territory, Riedrich, sparked a faint memory. He felt certain that the place name had appeared somewhere in the middle of the game's story. Suddenly, a memory from his early childhood surfaced. A moment of collapse after hearing someone mention that Riedrich had already been destroyed, that nothing was left. That fragment of memory unlocked a complete, joyous realization. He finally understood. He had been reincarnated into the game's world as a villain character, one whose territory was attacked and annihilated on the frontier. His elation instantly curdled into sheer horror. He was even less significant than a background character. He questioned internally if this was truly the main storyline. The grim implications settled upon him. Being born as a villain character with no special powers or protections meant that his kind mother and father, and indeed everyone in his town, were destined to perish. His hand clenched into a determined fist. He refused to simply accept this fate. He vowed to break that destruction flag, no matter what it took, relying on his one advantage, his knowledge of the game. He sat and considered his situation. The current timeline was 9 years before the start of the game's main plot. This meant he had 9 years to figure something out, but he desperately needed more information. An idea sparked. He recalled seeing a map of the local area earlier. With that map, he might be able to deduce the cause of his territory's eventual downfall. He pictured the map in his mind. His home, the Riedrich domain, was part of the Randhill border territory. He realized with a chilling certainty that it was completely surrounded by the domains of incredibly powerful villain characters from the game. The threats became clear. The jealous noble of Randhill to the south, the selfish demon of the major earldom to the east, a member of the demon race plotting conquest from the land of death, and the game's final boss, the witch of the silent forest. He clutched his head in despair, realizing he was trapped between forces as strong as final bosses. He despaired, shouting into the empty room. How could he, the son of a minor noble family, possibly stand against such overwhelming odds? His mind raced with the grim details. The territory was so insignificant that no one had noticed the villains gathering. He realized with dawning horror that he only had 9 years. 9 years until the game's scenario began and the villains made their move. Driven by this desperate timeline, he ventured to a desolate area near the northern land of death. He found a dilapidated shack, just as he remembered. If his memories of the game were correct, the person he sought would be here. As he reached for the door, a foot stepped out from the shadows. A hooded figure materialized behind him, pressing the cold steel of a knife to his throat and demanding to know his name and purpose. Startled, the boy wondered how anyone could have moved so silently. He stammered an apology for the intrusion, trying to introduce himself as Kane. The hooded figure pulled back slightly, their hostile demeanor shifting to one of concern. They questioned him, asking what was wrong and if something had happened. The boy, confused by the sudden change, almost called for his mother. He then saw the elf's pained expression as they repeated his name. Kane. The realization struck him. This person was Kane Alcius, one of the game's villains. A vision of the elf's future self flashed through his mind. A final boss-level character, one of the strongest in the game, known behind the scenes as the Demon Prime Minister, who mercilessly executed humans and brought ruin to the world. Back in the present, he looked at the distressed elf. He recalled the game's lore. Due to certain events, this land would fall into ruin, and Cain Alceus had lived nearby during their youth. He had come here specifically to meet this dangerous individual, a faint, knowing smile spreading across his face. His mind ignited with a brilliant realization. The game scenario didn't begin for another 9 years. That meant that right now, the future boss characters were still just children, too. He had time to prepare, to get to know them before they became villains. He pictured his predicament in the simplest terms. If he was careless, a death flag would appear. To survive, he couldn't just fight and defeat the other villains. He had to make them his allies. This was the realization he'd come to. His one and only path to survival was not to defeat the villains, but to utilize them, to turn those who would cause ruin into his own faction to protect his domain. Returning to the present moment, he watched as the young elf struggled with a heavy wooden door. The boy, Cain Alceus, called out for his mother, his voice strained. The protagonist knew instantly this was it. Cain Alceus finally forced the door open, apologizing for the intrusion. Inside, a woman with long, light-colored hair and pointed ears sat up in a simple bed, asking who was there. Before he could fully process the scene, Cain Alceus turned on him, demanding he not enter without permission. But the protagonist's attention was fixed on the woman's ear. It was pointed, just like her son's, a distinct feature of the demon race. The connection was unmistakable. Both of them were, without a doubt, members of the demon race. He surveyed the small, dilapidated hut. It was just as the game's lore described. They were hiding here to avoid persecution at the hands of humans. Cain Alceus explained in the game's timeline, this hideout is eventually discovered. He then turned his attention back to his mother, telling the protagonist that she still had a fever and needed to rest. A knowing smile spread across his face as he recalled the tragic events. Cain's mother would die from her illness, and this loss would ignite his quest for revenge against the kingdom. Her life was the key. As this thought crossed his mind, the woman spoke, apologizing for the delayed welcome. Stepping forward, he put his plan into motion. He introduced himself clearly as Adele Reedrich, the son of the Lord of Chris Reedrich. Cain Alceus froze in shock. The woman, Melchia, gently explained that she was sorry for the delay, as she had been nursing a fever. His words were met with a tense silence. Cain Alceus's face hardened with suspicion, his glare fixed on the young lord. Beside him, Melchia looked on with concern, apologizing for her son's hostility. She explained that his condition had been worsening over the years, which made him wary. In response, Adele stepped forward, his hand outstretched and glowing with a soft light. He made a bold claim, asking if they would believe him if he said he could cure that very illness. Their eyes widened in disbelief. A fragile hope sparked in Melchia's expression as she leaned forward, her voice trembling as she asked if it was truly possible to heal the disease. Cain Alceus, however, remained deeply skeptical. He stepped between Adele and his mother, refusing to trust the noble's convenient offer. But Melchia, from her bed, readily voiced her willingness to believe. The boy then met Cain's distrustful gaze with unwavering resolve. He proposed a pact. If he failed to cure Melchia, they could kill him without resistance. He then asked if those terms were acceptable. At the moss-covered entrance to the West Forest dungeon, Cain leads the way into the stone corridors. Behind him, the elf Cain Alceus holds onto a worried Melchia, questioning why they've been brought to a dungeon. The boy turns back, asking what they're doing in such a place. The elf speaks with a condescending formality, sarcastically asking if they truly expect to find a miracle cure here. Addressing the boy as Lord Cain's son, the elf chides his manner of speaking before dismissively telling him not to worry about it. Looking around the stone archway, the elf declares that this spot should suffice. Melchia glances at them with unease as Cain observes from the mouth of the passage. In response, Cain turns fully towards them, a confident smile spreading across his face. He gestures toward the open space and instructs the elf to cast a beginner-level water spell. The elf reacts with shock, questioning what he's talking about, but Cain presses on, stating that his mother is sick and feigning ignorance about the elf's hesitation. He continues the charade, arguing that someone who has been bettered in for years couldn't possibly possess such physical strength. He dismisses any potential issue, insisting that a beginner-level spell should be no problem at all. The elf lets out a weary sigh. Seeing this, Cain declares that it's useless and that he was wrong to trust humans. He tells his supposed mother that they should go home. The elf, Cain Alceus, calls out his name in frustration. His expression hardens as he reminds the elf of the promise to risk her life. He challenges them directly, asking if they plan to run away without even trying his proposal. The accusation hangs in the air, causing Melchia to look at the elf in shock and question. Mother! At this, Melchia turns to the elf, her face flushed with desperate hope. Please, Cain, she pleads, her voice trembling. I want to believe in Adele-sama. The elf, Cain Alceus, looks down, realizing they are trapped. A retreat now would be disastrous. They reluctantly agree, muttering that a beginner-level spell should be fine. Cain watches, a small, satisfied smirk on his face as he says, okay. Resigned, Cain Alceus closes their eyes and raises their hands. They tell Melchia that this should be enough to convince her, then shout for her to just give up already as they prepare to act. The imposter, cornered, attempts the spell. A glowing magic circle materializes before them, and from it erupts a colossal, violent torrent of water that blasts through the stone corridor. The sheer force of the magical deluge slams against the ancient stonework, flooding the area in an instant. As the water settles, the elf stares in utter disbelief, their face a mask of shock. Kane, however, simply offers a calm, knowing smile. Melchia, soaked but unharmed, marvels at the incredible power she just witnessed. The imposter, equally stunned, questions how beginner-level magic could possess such force. Seizing the moment, Kane steps forward, his voice firm, demanding to know what they did to his real mother. He doesn't wait for an answer, instead declaring with certainty that this, too, is a symptom of the illness. His words only deepen the elf's confusion. Tears stream down their face as they stammer, asking what the magic has to do with anything. Their gaze fixes on the boy, and they address him not as Kane, but as Adelsama. Meanwhile, a profound change comes over Melchia. She looks down at her own hands in wonder, explaining that ever since the water magic was released, the crushing weight on her body has suddenly vanished. She feels light. Testing this newfound lightness, she pushes herself up. Her legs tremble, but for the first time in ages, they hold her weight. She stands on her own. She turns to Kane, apologizing for her abruptness, her voice filled with a mix of disbelief and hope. He watches her, his expression unreadable. Overwhelmed by emotion, Melchia sinks to her knees, supported by Kane. She confesses that she had accepted her fate, believing she would slowly succumb to her illness. The thought of ever standing on her own again had seemed an impossible dream. She is overcome with emotion, tears of joy streaming down her face as she struggles to find the words to thank him. Kane, looking up at her, simply states that he only did what was natural. Internally, however, he celebrates his success. He had been confident that the method derived from his old world's knowledge would be effective, and relief washes over him now that it has worked perfectly. His triumphant thought is cut short by a sudden realization. The powerful water magic has left Melchia's shirt completely soaked and transparent. As he reels from the sight, Melchia suddenly loses her balance and collapses forward, pressing him into the bed. She apologizes profusely to Adelsama, explaining that she still lacks the strength to stand. She continues to apologize, still unable to move, and urges him not to overexert himself while she recovers. Kane, meanwhile, is completely overwhelmed by the situation. Later, the atmosphere shifts. Kane stands before the imposter, his expression serious, and demands to know why they abandoned their mother just because she contracted a magical illness. The imposter stammers, caught off guard by the pointed question. They explain that Melchia was suffering from magic power sickness. To put it simply, it's a disease where an overabundance of magic power stagnates within the body, effectively poisoning the afflicted. The bandaged imposter looks down, recalling the severity of such a condition. Kane listens intently, his expression unreadable. They then turn directly to Kane, addressing him formally as Adelsama and offering a sincere apology for their previous discourtesy. The imposter, a young elven woman, clenches her fist and explains her distrust. She recounts how the demon race has suffered terribly at the hands of humans, making it impossible for her to place her faith in anyone, even him. She knelt in the shallow water before him, her gaze earnest. She explained that Adele had taught her how to save her mother from her illness, and for that she, Kane Alcius, would risk her own life to serve him. With her head bowed low, she formally pledged her lifelong loyalty to him. He was momentarily taken aback by the sudden, intense declaration, while she looked up at him with a faint, hopeful blush. Accepting her pledge, he extended a hand to help her to her feet, formally welcoming her. From a short distance away, framed by stone archways, Adele observed the exchange. Several days later, the elf had taken on a new role. Dressed in a sharp butler's uniform, she carried a tea service into a study, announcing to Adele that the tea was ready. Kane sat at a desk in the background, already engrossed in his work. In another part of the estate, Kane spoke with Melchia, thanking her. He explained that he had arranged with his father for both her and the elf to be employed at the mansion. Melchia, in turn, confirmed she was practicing the water magic Adele had instructed her to use. Later, back in the study, the elf butler elaborated on the nature of the illness. She stated that without actively releasing magic, the sickness could never be cured, no matter how much the afflicted person rested. She explained that magic power sickness occurs when one's magic recovers beyond its maximum capacity, poisoning the body. Therefore, the symptoms are alleviated by moderately releasing that excess power. Listening to this, Kane sipped his tea, realizing how dangerous the previous course of treatment had been. He looked up from his books, impressed. He praised Adele's profound knowledge, remarking that it was far too detailed to be dismissed as simple game knowledge. The elf corrected him gently, stating it was more than that. With deep sincerity, she explained that her loyalty stemmed from his kindness in hiring both her and her mother without discriminating against them for being of the demon race. For that, she vowed to spend her life repaying the debt. Kane studies a map spread open in a large tome, his expression thoughtful. He realizes that with the previous threat neutralized, the route where he was fated to be killed is no longer a danger. His thoughts immediately shift, his finger tracing the page to his next objective. His new target is clear. The one who resides in the West Forest, a powerful figure known as the Witch of the Silent Forest. 3 months have passed since Adele hired Kane and Melchia. During this time, while serving the young master, Kane has diligently used his spare moments to practice his swordsmanship. The next morning, as Adele makes his way through the residence, he is greeted warmly. It is Shita, who has taken charge of the cooking and the household duties. She smiles brightly, announcing that breakfast is ready. He thanks her kindly. As he eats, Adele marvels at how exquisite Shita's cooking is, which brings a pleased blush to her cheeks. His thoughts then turn to more serious matters, and he asks if she plans to go to the dungeon today for her mana sickness treatment. She confirms her intention to go. Adele decides he must accompany her, stating that it's time to press forward with their conquest of the Witch of Calamity's labyrinth. Overjoyed, Shita declares that she will prepare a packed lunch for the trip and will call for Kane to join them. The dungeon they are heading towards, located in the West Forest, holds a profound secret. Deep within its lowest level sleeps Shita, the Witch of the Silent Forest. She possesses enough mana to destroy the world and is known to grant immense power to whoever breaks her seal. In the original story, she was a tragic figure, driven to despair by the wicked and eventually becoming an object of hatred for humanity. In time, she would become feared as the Witch of Calamity, a villain who brought destruction upon the world. Adele understands that this tragic future only unfolds after the start of the game's main events. He specifically chose this location for Shita's treatment because there is still a 9-year grace period. With a determined clench of his fist, he resolves that he must be the one to reach the dungeon's lowest level before anyone else can break Shita's seal. His resolve is momentarily shaken by the thought of the bento Shita is making, which he feels is far too peaceful for such a grim task. His concern proves justified. Outside the dungeon entrance, Shita has laid out a full picnic from a large basket. As she and Kane settle onto the blanket, Adele can only stare, overwhelmed by how incongruously tranquil the scene is. He stood before Shita, who suggested they could discuss his future objectives later, noting that the current dungeon floor was safe from enemies. She then looked at him earnestly and asked why he had decided to come to the dungeon on this particular day. Before he could answer, Shita offered him a piece of food, which he accepted without hesitation. His casual demeanor caused her 2 attendants to fall to their knees in shock. The maid frantically asked if he was truly intending to challenge the lower floors, while the butler questioned if this was meant to be a picnic. He clarified his intentions with a reassuring smile. While acknowledging that reaching the very bottom was his ultimate goal, he explained that today's visit was simply for reconnaissance. He assured them all that he had no plans to venture into the deeper levels just yet. His words brought visible relief to Shita, but her expression quickly shifted to one of eager determination. She proposed that since they had come this far, they might as well press onward a little deeper. Her sudden enthusiasm caught Adele off guard, prompting him to question her unexpected eagerness. Her earnestness sparked a memory. He recalled a younger Shita, brandishing a sword, proudly announcing to his mother that she was there to demonstrate the fruits of her training for him. He remembered his mother, holding him close, thinking to herself that she had witnessed Shita's diligent efforts day after day. The memory then shifted to one from his previous life. He saw his former self encouraging a girl who strongly resembled Shita, telling her that even if success seemed impossible today, he looked forward to the day her hard work would pay off. She had responded with a determined, blushing smile. Returning to the present at the dungeon's entrance, he assessed the situation. He knew that in the game, the recommended level for this dungeon was 20, far beyond his current capabilities. He felt a wave of relief that he had brought Shita along. As he contemplated this, Shita turned to him, suggesting it was time for him to cast his water magic. He watched her prepare, his expression turning serious as he crossed his arms. He weighed his options internally, acknowledging that while there was some time before the witch's seal could be broken by others, securing her as an ally as soon as possible was the most prudent course of action. His thoughts drifted to the witch herself, Shita. He pictured her as she was in the game, a being of pure self-interest, yet undeniably one of the most popular, alluring, and powerful top-tier characters. He then imagined the ultimate reward for his efforts. Shita, freed from her prison, intimately thanking his former self. Snapping back to reality, he clenched his fist with resolve, realizing that such a potential outcome made his entire endeavor worthwhile. His fantasy intensifies as he imagines the witch Shita pulling him into a close embrace. She whispers that she will grant him anything he desires, her voice soft and alluring. Lost in the moment, he revels in the thought of being so thoroughly pampered by her, a blissful smile spreading across his face. Even in his daydream, Shita appears in the background, watching with a smug, encouraging grin. His pleasant daydream is violently interrupted. Snapping back to reality, Adele's eyes widen in alarm as he turns, shouting to demand what is going on. His shocked gaze falls upon 2 unfamiliar attendants, a maid and a butler with pointed ears. The maid, looking incensed, points forward and demands to know what they think they're doing there. Adele can only stare, utterly bewildered by their sudden appearance. The maid's accusation is directed at a figure who steps forward with imposing fury. Shita, the witch of the Silent Forest, herself. She glares at the group, her voice booming as she demands if they are aware that this is her sacred dwelling. Adele is paralyzed with shock, his mind racing with questions. He cannot comprehend how the witch herself could suddenly appear on an upper floor of the dungeon, wondering if her seal had somehow already been broken. A palpable, shadowy aura of fury emanates from Shirana, causing Kane to recoil in terror. He realizes she is incandescently angry, believing the elf attendant is being brainwashed right before their eyes. The cloaked figure, Kane Alceus, addresses the attendant and Melchia directly, his voice dripping with condescension as he mentions the trouble they have caused him. Confused, Melchia asks what he could possibly mean. His feigned ignorance only fuels Shiana's rage. Her expression hardens into a cold glare as she questions if he truly intends to play dumb. In response, she summons a flickering flame into her palm. Power crackles around her as she declares her intent to make him understand the full extent of her fury with his own body. As she prepares to unleash her devastating magic, Kane acts instantly, shoving the elf attendant out of the line of fire. He understands with dreadful clarity that Shiana's power is on par with that of the final boss. He pulls the attendant along, desperately trying to figure out a course of action. Behind them, Shirana smiles with chilling delight, proclaiming that angering her is a lesson he will learn to regret. In that moment, an idea strikes Kane. His plan crystallizes. He whirls around and shouts an urgent command to Melchia: cast water magic on their cloaked adversary. Though startled, she immediately acknowledges the order. As Shirana gathers a massive, swirling vortex of dark energy, Kane's reasoning becomes clear. Her powerful magic requires significant casting time. A weaker, faster spell is their only chance. He yells for Melchia to act now. With a final, desperate roar, he screams for her to unleash it. Melchia responds, thrusting her hands forward as a torrent of water erupts towards the target. A colossal cloud of steam instantly engulfs Kane Alceus. Kane watches the aftermath, realizing they've created a steam explosion. Not only did it prevent Shiana's attack from being unleashed, but it also created the perfect cover for an escape. His suspicion is confirmed. The elf attendant is indeed the culprit. He and his companions look up as the steam clears, revealing a young girl in a witch's outfit floating before them. She looks down with an annoyed pout, complaining about being drenched in water yet again. With a tearful glance towards Kane, she introduces herself as Shirana. Following her introduction, a brilliant light emanates from her. She declares that the illusion has been dispelled. Kane watches, confused, wondering aloud what she means by illusion. She explains that the form they'd seen just moments ago was merely a fake created with illusion magic. Puffing out her chest with pride, she announces that this smaller, younger appearance is her true form. The realization strikes Kane with full force. If her adult form was an illusion, then the adult man he saw must have been one as well. He processes the shocking truth. That is how he will look when he grows up. As he stands stunned by this thought, the elf attendant beside him speaks up, addressing him formally as Adelsama. Shirana, however, seems lost in her own world. She gazes at Kane with a deep blush, her fist clenching tightly as she whispers how much she had been looking forward to finally meeting him. Her lovesick expression and earnest words shatter his composure. The mental image of his future self being affectionately pursued by the illusory adult Shirana cracks and breaks apart in his mind, and he recoils in absolute horror. He collapses to his knees, completely overwhelmed. Seizing the moment, Melchia steps forward to question Shirana, asking about the nuisance and culprit she had mentioned earlier, as well as the matter of the water magic. In response, Shirana whirls around and points an accusatory finger directly at the elf attendant. She declares loudly that he is the one who has been subjecting her to water damage every single day. Kane can only look on, his face burning with embarrassment. The group stands in a stone corridor as the maid explains the flooding. She had been leaving water magic there, but now it seems to have overflowed. She clarifies that this is the second floor, where a seal is located. If a large amount of water isn't poured on it daily, it breaks. The water then flows down to the lowest level, where her mistress is. Adele questions if she means her mistress is trapped on the very bottom floor. Suddenly, a loud crash echoes as the wall of the seal shatters. Shirana recoils in shock, realizing that the water she just added has caused the very disaster she was meant to prevent. She cries out that the person inside will drown. The maid, Kane, and Adele look on in horror as the maid admits she was only trying to buy some time. As a result of the flooding, she realizes her own escape has been cut off, forcing her to flee to an upper level. Her boots stand firm on the damp stone floor. She stands amidst a swirling, dark aura, understanding that this time she was the one who was tricked, doused in water as a direct challenge. Her face twists in fury. She grits her teeth, seething at how she could have been made a fool of in such a way. Seeing the witch's palpable anger, Adele reacts instantly, pushing Kane behind her and shouting for him to take cover. He watches from behind Adele, his eyes wide with distress. All he ever wanted was to help Melchia. His mind races with the terrible realization that this is a new trap, one connected to Melchia's destruction. Her water magic will be useless now. A sense of dread washes over him as he wonders if this is the end. As the thought takes hold, the maid's voice calls out to him. The maid bows low, offering a profuse apology. Adele keeps a protective hand on Kane's shoulder as the young woman expresses her deep regret. She straightens up, clutching her chest with a pained expression. She confesses that she was the one who released the water magic, explaining it was a desperate measure to treat an illness she had contracted. Both Kane and Shirana stare, stunned by the revelation. He watched as the witch, Mina, addressed the distraught maid, clarifying that she had no intention of bringing harm to them, as she could sense there was no malice in the maid's actions. The maid, overwhelmed with emotion, pleaded for forgiveness, begging them not to hold her mistress accountable. Adele looked on with concern, murmuring her mother's name, as the maid continued to implore them. Stepping forward, he accepted the blame. He declared that since he was the one who allowed Melchia to use magic, the responsibility was his, and the only course of action was to apologize sincerely. He then bowed deeply before Adele, expressing his profound regret. He admitted that while it was unintentional, he was deeply sorry for all the trouble he had caused her. Adele's hand tightened into a fist for a moment before she, too, turned and offered her own apology to the witch Sharana. Mina simply acknowledged it, stating that if there was no ill will, then the matter was settled. Relieved by the apparent forgiveness, he made a generous offer to Adele, telling her to let them know if there was anything at all they could do to help. At his words, Mina's face transformed. A wide, unnerving grin spread across her lips as she repeated his offer back to him, her eyes shadowed ominously by the brim of her hat. He recoiled, a wave of dread washing over him. He had made a terrible mistake. He realized that despite her childlike appearance, she was the villain, and if she demanded their lives, he had just given her the opening. But her menacing demeanor vanished as quickly as it appeared. With a cheerful smile, Mina announced that she was simply hungry and demanded they treat her to a meal at their home. The sudden, mundane request left everyone speechless. His mind fractured. The request triggered a terrifying vision of the Witch of Calamity, Sharana, descending upon his home with overwhelming power. He stared in horror, wondering why this was happening, as the vision of an enraged Mina filled his sight. While the boy was lost in his terrifying vision, Mina, completely unaware, beamed with pure delight. Her face lit up with a wide, happy smile. Her cheeks flushed as she expressed how much she was looking forward to their arrangement. Under the light of a full moon, Sharana gazes up at a grand mansion, her eyes wide with excitement. She asks Cain if this is his home, to which he, with a weary expression, confirms that it is indeed quite large. His mind races with the implications. He recalls that in the game, Sharana possessed the power of a final boss. A single misstep in dealing with her could spell a disastrous end, a game over from which there would be no recovery. Inside the grand estate, the interior is immaculate. Sharana peeks in, impressed by the cleanliness. A young girl in a formal suit explains to a maid that Melchia and the other staff ensure the house is thoroughly cleaned every day. Her observation prompts Sharana to turn to Cain. She remarks that possessing the wealth to employ so many maids in such a large house means he must be of a rather high social standing. Cain simply looks away, a bead of sweat on his face. She leans closer, a sharp grin on her face, as she points a finger at him. She demands to know who he really is and why he would dare make her clean his room, reminding him she hasn't forgiven the water dousing incident. Cain is taken aback, realizing that earning her favor might be far more difficult than he'd initially thought. Their tense exchange is interrupted by the arrival of an older, distinguished man in a suit. He formally welcomes Adele-sama home before turning his attention to Sharana, politely inquiring if she is a guest. He is soon joined by the young girl and the maid. The girl asks who the visitor is, while maid greets the man as Baron-sama. Sharana asks who he is, and the girl identifies him as Baron, the head butler. Cain interjects, telling Baron to receive their important guest properly and prepare some food. His firm request catches the head butler's attention. Cain insists that Sharana be treated with the utmost care. A look of understanding passes over Baron's face, and with a slight narrowing of his eyes, he acknowledges the command. The head butler then turns to the others, stating that he has managed the servants since before the young girl was born and that none are unsatisfactory. He suggests that combining Melchia's cooking with the girl's service will be a perfect match, then instructs them to wait in their room. 30 minutes later, seated in a lavish dining room, Shiana's patience wears thin. She stands abruptly, declaring that they are late and demanding to know how long they intend to make her wait. Cain and the young girl sit silently at the table. As the wait continues, the young girl in the suit grows agitated, reminding the head butler, Baron, that Melchia is preparing the meal and they must be patient. She anxiously asks where he has been, but he simply steps forward, offering a calm apology for the delay. He then approaches Sharana, who looks up in surprise as he presents her with a large, beautiful bouquet of roses. Baron explains that they were picked from the garden at Adele's request. As the girl in the suit watches, stunned, Baron quietly explains Adele's reasoning to her. He relays that the young master felt such a beautiful lady deserved beautiful flowers as a form of special hospitality for an important guest. Internally, Baron muses that Adele is quite the charmer for his age, but firmly resolves that he will not permit any disrespect towards him. Sharana, holding the bouquet, blushes faintly. The girl in the suit observes this change in demeanor with disbelief, wondering how the witch could suddenly seem so flustered and different. Just then, a maid arrives carrying a tray. Baron begins to object, stating that they cannot serve that, but the maid announces that the meal for Sharana is ready. The girl in the suit is taken aback, sensing an unexpectedly pleasant atmosphere developing. She places a steaming, freshly baked meat pie on the table, along with a bowl of soup. The maid proudly explains that the pie is a specialty of the house. The girl in the suit silently reflects that while she had anticipated a more ostentatious meal, Melchia's cooking is superb and should please even the temperamental witch. As a knife slices cleanly through the pie's crust, Sharana takes her first bite, her eyes widening in astonishment. She murmurs that it's delicious, so warm and soft, a sensation entirely new to her. Nearby, Melchia, Baron, and a young attendant watch her reaction with rapt attention. Observing this from across the table, Kane finds the scene perplexing. He thinks to himself that he's never seen such appetizing food, yet it's stranger still that Sharana, who has lived for so long, seems to be experiencing it for the very first time. His train of thought is broken as Sharana turns toward him, a look of dawning realization on her face. She wonders aloud if this means she's never been given a proper meal before, questioning the kind of treatment she must have endured until now. The moment of introspection passes quickly. With a satisfied sigh, Sharana stretches her arms high, declaring herself full. She announces that the hospitality operation was a success. At the table, her plate is now completely empty. Kane considers their next move, thinking that they've already made a strong impression with Melchia's cooking. As he wonders what else they can do to entertain their guest, Melchia approaches Sharana and asks if she would like to take a bath, catching the witch by surprise. She then gives Kane a knowing wink before announcing to everyone that their large bath is quite spacious and perfect for soothing away fatigue. Kane looks on, slightly taken aback by her forwardness. From the doorway to the bathing area, Melchia cheerfully offers to wash Shiana's back, much to the witch's flustered surprise. Kane steps forward, voicing his concern to Melchia. He asks if it's truly all right for the two of them to be alone, thanking her for her consideration, but clearly worried. He clarifies that he doesn't think Sharana is particularly dangerous, but Melchia's expression hardens with determination. She meets his gaze intently and states firmly, here. Her voice echoes slightly in the steam-filled, ornate bathing chamber as she finishes her thought, telling him to leave everything to her. Inside the vast bath, Sharana looks around in awe, exclaiming that she has never seen such a large bath before. Already in the water, Melchia smiles and suggests that since it's so wide, they should go for a swim. She watches, amused, as Sharana stands wrapped in a towel, completely flustered. The witch mutters that any strange moves will result in her being turned to ash. Unfazed, she cheerfully welcomes Sharana into the private bath. When Sharana expresses surprise, Melchia notes that it's unusual for a master to bathe with a servant, adding that while Adele had asked her to look after Kane, her son chose not to join them. From across the water, Adele's voice cuts in. Sharana turns to her, questioning the wisdom of bathing with a stranger and calling it dangerous. Adele, however, simply smiles and states that she trusts the witch completely. She elaborates, reasoning that if Sharana had meant them harm, she would have acted long ago. With that, she warmly encourages the witch to join them in the water. Heeding her words, Sharana finally steps into the bath with a soft sigh. As she settles, Melchia explains that the water is special, imbued with healing properties for illness and injury, which is why she wanted Sharana to experience it. Her attention then turns to Adele, whom she asks directly if she is a 1,000-year-old witch. Adele confirms this, stating she is far older than her master and does not measure her life on a human scale. She then apologizes for her earlier forwardness, explaining it was for the sake of treatment and admitting she never expected to find such a small girl in a dungeon. Sharana looks down, quietly affirming that she is small. Seeing her reaction, Adele quickly clarifies that she meant Sharana looks to be the same age as her son. The comparison leaves Sharana speechless. Adele's expression softens as she continues, confiding that if her own daughter were still alive, she imagines she would be a lovely girl, just like Sharana. She expresses her happiness with the situation, and a look of profound realization dawns on the witch's face. In a steamy bath, Sharana is startled by a sudden splash near her feet. Confused and vulnerable, she wonders what is happening. The shock causes her to lose her footing, and she slips dramatically into the water. Outside the bath, Kane cries out her name in a panic, his face a swirl of horror. Sometime after the chaotic fall, Kane sits primly and offers a sincere apology to a flustered Melchia, assuring her he's fine. Nearby, the head butler, Baron, coolly instructs another staff member to prepare a single room for them, urging them to hurry. Despite his calm exterior, an exaggerated fear gripped him. He recalled Shiana's foul mood when she first awoke and worried what he would do if her anger literally blew him away in an explosion. His fears, however, were unfounded. Sharana slowly regained consciousness, finding her head resting gently on Kane's lap. Disoriented, she murmured, trying to understand where she was. As she sat up, now dressed in dry clothes, Kane explained that she had slipped and fallen in the bath. The memory returned to her. He added that he was relieved she wasn't angry, as he had only been trying to help. Her gaze drifted around the opulent room, taking in the high ceilings and ornate chandelier. She turned back to Kane and asked if his parents were not present. He explained that his parents were currently away on business, as was the lord of the domain. He clarified that his family holds significant authority compared to other lords, which often requires them to travel. He then asked why she was curious. His answer seemed to deeply unsettle her. Kneeling on the floor in shock, Shirana demanded to know how he could speak of others as his parents when they shared no blood connection. She exclaimed that they were different races, a fact that should make such a bond impossible. He moved to sit beside her on the bed, his tone gentle. He admitted he didn't fully understand her perspective, but suggested that more important than blood ties is the genuine care two people have for each other. He then asked if she truly believed that such feelings were unimportant. His words about family left her in deep thought. Shiana's gaze fell as she quietly wondered aloud what they should both make of their situation. Deciding the conversation could wait, he announced that a room had been prepared for her. Taking her gently by the sleeve, he told her it was time to rest for the day, and she offered a quiet word of thanks. But as he turned to leave, she tightened her grip on his arm. With a faint blush, she asked if they could sleep together, explaining that she still wanted to talk with him. The request stunned him into silence. Somehow, this led to him lying wide-eyed and rigid in bed, while Shirana slept peacefully beside him. He stared at the ornate ceiling, his mind racing as he tried to comprehend how a simple discussion had escalated to this. He felt a genuine fear that if he dared to fall asleep, he might not wake up. Beads of sweat formed on his brow. Unable to bear the tension, he quietly called out to her. To his surprise, a sleepy voice answered him from the pillow beside him. Now that she was awake, Shirana turned the conversation to the maid, Melshia. She asked about her illness, identifying it as magic power sickness, a condition where the body accumulates an excess of magical energy. He confirmed her diagnosis, explaining that Melshia's body becomes saturated with power if she doesn't release it periodically. That was the reason she had to go to the dungeon every day to cast water magic. As he spoke, a thought struck him. He wondered why Shirana had asked about Melshia in the bath earlier. Then he remembered with a jolt. She had said that when she awoke, she was sealed inside that very dungeon. She seemed to understand his unspoken question. She explained that, strangely, she just knew what her purpose was. It was like a setting in a game. She elaborated. She was programmed to lend her power to the one who broke her seal. The familiar terminology resonated with a memory from his past life. He listened as Shirana continued her story, her voice tinged with the weight of history. She explained that those who had unsealed her in the past were always afraid of her immense power, keeping their distance. They never shared a meal with her, nor did they join her in the bath as he had. Instead, they would simply use her abilities for their own ends and, once they were satisfied, seal her away again in that same dungeon. It was, she concluded, a lonely, repeating cycle. Lying awake, Kane watches as Shirana tosses in her sleep, her face etched with distress. She murmurs that this was not supposed to happen. She was meant to be feared, a monster. She recalls how Melshia had approached her, serving her like a maid. She continues to dream, reflecting that in her 1,000 years of existence, she has never been treated with such kindness. The unfamiliar feeling leaves her deeply unsettled. He listens to her troubled, sleep-talking, his own expression somber. Kane recalls the truth of her past. Shirana was meant to be completely alone in that dark dungeon. His thoughts drift to the events that followed her release. After her seal was broken, she was simply used by those who freed her, people with whom she had no personal connection. But now, for the first time, she is being treated as a person. Shiana's dreaming mind grapples with the unfamiliar intimacy, feeling as if she were a real daughter, and she questions the nature of this strange, new emotion. A vision of her past isolation surfaces, a lonely figure in a lightless underground dungeon, surrounded by ancient texts, waiting for hundreds of years for her seal to finally be broken. Unable to watch her suffer any longer, Kane gently shakes her awake. Is something wrong? He asks softly. Startled, Shirana opens her eyes and apologizes, still dazed from a dream. She sits up, a faint blush on her cheeks, and confesses that she was thinking about how dear he is to her. She then asks if he is worried about her appearance, and questions what he thought when Melshia referred to her as a daughter. Her composure breaks as she grips the sheets tightly. She insists that such a relationship is impossible. She is a witch, a monster. The denial is stark in her wide, fearful eyes. She looks at him, her voice steadying. What matters, she explains, is how she feels right now. She asks Kane to relay a message to Melshia the next day. If she felt even a little bit happy, she should tell her so. In a quiet moment, Adele, her face partially obscured by her hair, seeks confirmation. She asks if it is truly all right for her to be the one to make a decision. Later that night, in a shared bed, Shirana stirs from her sleep, murmuring softly as she begins to wake beside Kane. He, however, is wide awake. Lying still, Kane reflects on how they narrowly avoided death once again. Unsure of when the next danger might arise, he resolves, for everyone's sake, to remain vigilant and stay awake until morning. His resolve is broken by the morning light. Kane jolts upright in bed with a gasp, realizing with a shock that despite his best intentions, he had fallen asleep. He whips his head around to find the space beside him empty. Shirana is gone. A panicked vision flashes through his mind of her walking away with Melshia, and he thinks with dread that he must hurry to find her. He throws open the door to the adjoining room, shouting Melshia's name in alarm. His frantic entrance is met by a peaceful breakfast scene where Melshia, Adele, and Baron are already gathered. Melshia greets him warmly, noting he's finally awake. His confusion is palpable. Seeing his expression, Adele explains that Shirana had invited her to eat breakfast with them, adding that they will prepare a portion for him right away. Kane can only manage a stunned utterance in response. The explanation does little to calm his racing thoughts. He is completely bewildered. Sharana, inviting someone to breakfast? The idea seems so fundamentally out of character that he cannot comprehend what is happening. Adele's voice cuts through his confusion, directly addressing him. She asks if he remembers telling her the previous day that it would be fine if she made her own decision. Before he can process this, she beams triumphantly and declares that she has decided she will live in this house with them. He turns, flustered, to the formally dressed girl beside him, trying to backtrack. He stammers that he only meant Adele should decide what she thought was best, not that he was giving her permission to move in. The girl listens with a concerned expression, questioning how he could have given such permission to someone so dangerous. He remains frozen, his mind reeling from the declaration. He internally laments that Adele has truly done it, berating himself for the danger of inviting someone who would unleash such powerful magic upon their first meeting. As he grapples with his mistake, a voice calls out from the mansion grounds, announcing that breakfast is ready. The realization dawns on him. This was all part of Shiana's successful strategy. He can only wonder what is happening. Adele stands by a large, sunlit window, holding a cup and quietly observing the view. He sighs contentedly, remarking to himself how peaceful everything is. He takes a relaxed sip, reflecting that with Kane and Sharana now as his companions, this period in history should be free of conflict. He believes he can finally afford to relax for a little while. His calm is abruptly shattered as Sharana bursts into the room, calling his name with infectious excitement. She announces that they are going together to the lowest level of the West Forest dungeon, leaving Adele utterly stunned and speechless. He immediately lets out a vehement cry of refusal. Planting himself on the floor, he insists that he will absolutely not go to any dungeon. Sharana, however, is unimpressed. She reminds him that he's the one who fetched water from the dungeon before and now orders him to go to a room on the lowest level to retrieve her belongings. She dismisses his concerns, pointing out that he's been to the dungeon many times. He frantically retorts that monsters don't appear on the first floor and questions if she has any idea how many they would have to fight to reach the very bottom, stressing the extreme danger. His protests finally cease. Standing grimly in a doorway, he concedes that the area is probably fine and that he would handle anything that happened to her. However, he sternly warns her not to mock his weakness. He recalls the moment he first realized he had been reincarnated. The very first thing he did was check his own status, only to be met with a devastating truth. All of his magic values were 0, and his growth rate was a staggering -10. He had no aptitude for any element, rendering him completely unable to use magic. Clutching his chest, he relives the shock of that discovery. It wasn't just that he was born weak. His status had an abysmal growth rate of -10, a fact that was incredibly demoralizing. His despair hardens into a grim realization. He knows that learning even beginner magic, which takes a normal person weeks, would require years from him. The character he now inhabited, Adele, was originally designed to be overwhelmingly powerful. He concludes that the game's production company must have deliberately broken the character's settings. He is in essence a bug. He vehemently protests, declaring with absolute certainty that he would lose to even the weakest monster in this world. It's as if, he exclaims, he's been saddled with the most devastating debuff possible, making him a member of the weakest noble family. Despite his passionate plea, Sharana remains unmoved, listening with a blank expression as he insists that for someone as weak as him, venturing into the dungeon's lowest floor is a death sentence. She explains her predicament, stating that she asked others for help, but everyone claimed to be busy. Adele stammers in disbelief, finding it impossible that no one else was available. As he tries to escape, the head butler, Baron, appears with an encouraging wink, telling the boy to enjoy his first date and that he will handle everything at the manor. Sharana firmly grabs the struggling Adele, declaring that she needs a porter and that it's time to go. His protests are futile. They soon arrive at the second basement level of the West Forest dungeon. Adele looks around the empty stone corridors in shock, questioning the complete absence of monsters. She reassures him, explaining that she already told him it would be fine because she had Melshia use her water magic to eliminate all the monsters beforehand. Internally, she reflects that there was no need for him to refuse so desperately, as the dungeon will be a safe place to gather magical power for some time. They finally reach their destination, a room identified as Shiana's, which has been utterly ransacked. Furniture is shattered, and books and papers litter the floor, leaving Adele to stare in astonishment at the incredible mess. She turns to him with a charming smile, explaining that this mess is precisely why she needed him. She asks for his help in finding her belongings, promising to thank him properly later. Adele looks on, annoyed, realizing she could have just used a spell for this. Surrounded by magical artifacts, Sharana flips through a grimoire, remarking on the sheer quantity of books and staves. Holding one such staff, Adele questions if so many are truly necessary, speculating that each must have a unique effect. Sharana then peers into a closet, noting that the clothes inside seem to be in perfect condition. Having changed, she explains the staff's properties. It enhances the wielder's affinity for the water attribute, allowing anyone with even a slight aptitude to use water magic. She clarifies that while a novice would be limited to low-level spells, is undeniably a true magical tool. He internally reviews his own status, recalling that his magical aptitude is 0 across all elements. A realization dawns on him. Perhaps by simply equipping the staff, he could bypass his natural limitations and finally cast a spell. Meanwhile, Shirana has finished changing into a simple nightgown. Admiring her reflection in a tall mirror, she confirms with a satisfied smile that the garment fits her perfectly. She turns and happily presents her new attire to Adele, remarking on how nice it is. She then makes a simple request for some water, leaving him momentarily puzzled. Understanding her intent as a test, he seizes the opportunity. With intense concentration, he raises the staff and shouts an incantation, commanding a water bullet to form in response to her call. A powerful torrent of water bursts forth from the staff's gem, drenching her from head to toe in an instant. He stares, stunned by his own success. He actually used magic. Across from him, Shirana stands dripping and shivering, her expression shifting from surprise to cold fury. The boy can hardly believe that he, with no training whatsoever, managed to cast a spell. Overcome with excitement, he rushes forward, getting uncomfortably close to her face. With a blush of sheer exhilaration, he demands that she give him the staff. She stares back, a blush creeping onto her cheeks as his demand sinks in. She internally marvels at the situation, thinking that an item of such incredible power shouldn't even exist in this world, and that its previous owner's collection was truly in a league of its own. She relents, explaining that the ring on her finger is a magical tool that enhances the effects of healing magic. Adele, clutching the staff she has apparently given him, is overcome with excitement. He realizes that with this method, he might be able to level up smoothly, setting his sights on the goal of becoming the weakest aristocrat. Several weeks later, his plan is put into action. He stands at the edge of a large, stone-floored chamber, now completely submerged in water, a project finally complete. He turns to Shirana, who expresses her admiration for his clever strategy. She recalls Melshia's previous report, noting that the monsters on this floor had been completely wiped out by water magic. This new approach was a stark contrast to the old way of gaining experience, a grueling process of defeating monsters one by one that left adventurers battered and exhausted. Shirana explains her contribution to the new strategy. She first cast a barrier to prevent the water and monsters from escaping the chamber. Then, after the monsters had perished in the flood, she could use her own magic to revive them within the water, allowing Adele to defeat them repeatedly with ease. However, she wryly notes that even with this plan, it took weeks for his magic alone to submerge a single floor. Kane pants with exhilaration, fists clenched in triumph. Shirana praises his remarkable ability to gain unlimited experience points, calling his spirit impressive. A blushing, Kane humbly attributes his success to her assistance. Her praise is cut short by a sudden splash. A large, dark paw steps into their training area, and Shiana's expression turns to shock. She questions how anything could have gotten in, as a disembodied voice asks what's happening. The source of the intrusion reveals itself. A large, menacing wolf with a dark, shaggy coat and glowing eyes, a strange bell hanging from its neck. Kane stares in disbelief, questioning how it could have broken through Shiana's barrier. The witch grimly concludes that her protective ward must have been too weak. As the beast growls, Kane moves to stand between it and Shirana. The witch calls out his name, Adele, her eyes wide with alarm. Recognizing the creature's formidable power, similar to a previous foe, she resolves that she has no choice but to intervene, summoning a flame to her hand. But before she can act, Kane tightens his grip on his staff. He questions his own resolve, wondering if he truly intends to fight this monster himself after all the effort he and Shirana put into his training, especially after he had so vehemently insisted on his own weakness. His moment of doubt passes, replaced by determination. Facing the lunging beast, he declares that he, too, must be growing stronger. He commands his staff to answer his call and become a piercing bullet. From behind him, Shirana screams his name in terror. He unleashes his spell, Water Bullet. A concentrated blast of water erupts from the staff, striking the wolf with immense force and throwing it back. The creature lands in a heap, unmoving. Kane stands firm, his staff still extended, a look of mild surprise on his face. A moment of stunned silence is broken by his triumphant shout. He leaps into the air, celebrating his victory and eagerly telling Shirana that he's indeed growing stronger. As she approaches, a look of dazed confusion crosses his face as he stares at his hands, questioning if he was truly the one who defeated the beast. Shirana confirms his success, pulling up a status display. "You did it. Thank you, Shirana," he exclaims. She points to the screen, showing him that his water magic value has increased from 0 to 1. With a gentle smile, she tells him that for a slave of his caliber, this is hardly a major feat, and he looks down, bashfully accepting her praise. Her words, meant to tease, instead spark a powerful realization within him. With a determined glint in his eyes and a fist clenched in resolve, he understands. If he continues to level up at this rate, he might just be able to stand on his own 2 feet and steer himself away from the path of destruction that awaits him as a villainous character. He returns home, beaming with satisfaction from his successful training, while Mina looks on, slightly flustered by his cheerful energy. He happily announces his arrival. Upon reaching the entrance, Adele greets them. She informs Kane that a guest has arrived from the neighboring territory and is waiting for him. Confused, Kane asks who it could be, but Adele simply apologizes for the suddenness of the visit. Inside, Adele continues, noting that his leveling is progressing well and that he might avoid the next destruction flag if he keeps it up. However, she then reveals that his father is currently with the guest from the neighboring territory. The news hits Kane with force, and he shouts in disbelief, questioning if she truly meant the neighboring territory. His mind races with alarm. He wonders aloud if some villainous character has appeared, questioning who would come to visit. As he panics, his mother appears in the background, calmly noting that they have returned. Suddenly, a graceful young woman steps forward and introduces herself to Adele as Flare Lesgard, the Explosion Saintess. Kane freezes, his eyes wide with shock as he recognizes the name. The arrival of this particular figure is the very destruction flag he had been desperately trying to avoid. His name is Adele Reed-Rich, and he is a reincarnated person. He came to this realization after being reborn as the son of a noble family in a remote land. This world was identical to that of a game he once played, Martha's Footprints. In that game, his character was a villain destined for ruin. With the main story still 9 years away, he understood that he was already on a path to destruction, powerless against the other formidable villains he would have to face. Faced with this grim future, he devised a counterplan. He would destroy the other villainous characters who posed a threat, gathering powerful allies to help him eliminate them one by one. His efforts proved successful. He managed to befriend Kane, the last of the demon race, and Sharana, a powerful witch. Just as he began to feel a sense of security, believing he had averted the immediate dangers, a new potential threat to his existence appeared. Standing before Adele and his companions is a young woman with long, flowing, light-colored hair. She greets him formally, introducing herself as Flare Lesgard. Her name sends a jolt through Adele. He recognizes her immediately, thinking that in the game's original story, Flare wasn't supposed to appear until much later. He wonders why the Explosion Saintess is here now, noting that this title was not her official one. The title of Saintess is a sacred designation, one that can only be bestowed upon an individual chosen by the Grand Shrine religious organization. Adele realizes the gravity of the situation. Flare is a figure known to trigger destructive events wherever she goes. By befriending Kane and Sharana, he had altered the future, and now the world's compulsory force seemed to be correcting his changes by bringing the Explosion Saintess to him. She smiles warmly, confirming his identity. "You're Adele, aren't you?" she asks, expressing her pleasure at finally meeting him. Adele is momentarily speechless, while his elven companion watches the exchange intently. A nearby butler informs Adele that a room has been prepared for their guest. Regaining his composure, Adele welcomes Flare, thanking her for the visit. Internally, he resigns himself to the fact that she is here now, and he has no choice but to face whatever comes next. He leads his new guest into the mansion, internally cautioning her to be careful not to destroy the premises. His mind is already racing, trying to figure out how to get her to leave as soon as possible. Inside a well-appointed room, Flare Lesgard sits with perfect composure, thanking them for their gracious response to her sudden visit. Melchia, serving as a maid, offers her tea. As Flare accepts, Adele and Mina can only watch the polite, yet tense, exchange. He observes her, noting that on the surface, she appears to be just an ordinary girl. A dreadful thought then grips him. What if this is merely a facade before she destroys the entire town? The possibility leaves him aghast. His imagination runs wild, picturing her serene appearance, concealing a powerful, violent impulse just waiting to be unleashed. The boy's fear projects a menacing aura behind the Saintess as she calmly sips her tea. He concludes that her smile might be masking genuine anger and resolves that he must be exceedingly careful with his every word and action. Later, he confers with Mina, explaining that this new development has introduced another deeply unsettling element to their situation. Melchia stands by listening. Mina, momentarily distracted, asks Melchia if her tea was made with plenty of milk and sugar. Her focus then snaps back to the problem, and she points at Melchia, warning that she is the one most likely to inadvertently provoke the Saintess's wrath. She explains that if a battle were to break out between the two of them, the entire territory would be blown away without a trace. The thought terrifies Adele, who can only pray that Flare's temper has a very long fuse. Steeling himself, he turns back to their guest with a polite smile. He asks what business brings her to their home, secretly planning to uncover her true intentions and find a way to make her leave. She explains that she was nearby on official Saintess business and decided to stop by to offer her greetings. The answer stuns Adele. He knows she has never done such a thing before, especially without an appointment. He immediately concludes that she must be lying. Inside a well-appointed room, Sharana sits beside Kane on a plush sofa. With a bright smile, she asks if he remembered to bring a souvenir for their host, Flare. He freezes, a look of sheer panic on his face as he realizes his oversight. He apologizes, explaining that he was in such a rush that it completely slipped his mind. Sharana clarifies that in the human world, it's customary to bring a gift when visiting someone's home. She then admits her true motive. A previous guest brought delicious sweets, and she was simply hoping to eat some more. As Sharana daydreams about the potential treats, Kane leaps to his feet, but in his haste he trips and stumbles forward, falling directly towards Flare. He lands on top of her, his face just inches from hers. As he stammers an apology, Flair's cheeks flush a deep crimson. In the background, Shirana also offers a frantic apology for her role in the accident. The boy's own face turns beet red with mortification as he apologizes profusely for such an unforgivable act of rudeness toward the Saintess. Flair, though still blushing, tells him not to worry about it, but adds with a small, knowing smile that she might not forgive him if it happens again. He clenches his fists, silently vowing that he cannot afford another mistake. Beside him, Shirana, now nibbling on a cookie she acquired, mentions that something has caught her interest. She turns to Flair and asks what exactly a Saintess is. Kane, momentarily distracted by the cookie in her hand, exclaims that it's delicious. His attention snaps back to the conversation, and he scolds Shirana for her question. He insists that Saintess is a revered title that everyone knows. Unimpressed, Shirana asks why he's getting so worked up, wondering aloud if he's just trying to show off his knowledge. He bows his head toward Flair again, apologizing for Shiana's lack of worldly knowledge. Flair simply smiles and tells him not to worry about it. She then begins her explanation. The title of Saintess, she clarifies, is a rank bestowed upon those recognized by the Great Temple. This temple, she continues, is an organization that worships the God who created their world, and its ultimate purpose is to bring peace to all. Kane considered her words, marveling at the idea of being chosen as a Saintess. He thought it was an incredible achievement, but the accompanying thought of constantly needing to maintain a perfect demeanor seemed utterly exhausting. As he mulled this over, Flair continued her explanation. She noted that in addition to light magic, she could also use recovery magic, and surmised that her healing abilities must have been why they sought her out during her duties. Her words, however, triggered a jarring thought in Kane's mind. Recalling her title of Explosion Saintess, he suddenly pictured her unleashing destructive fire magic. The startling mental image made him fall silent, prompting a concerned Flair to ask what was wrong. He began to stammer, but Flair simply offered a warm smile. She clarified that she was still in training and was merely traveling to visit various lands to broaden her horizons, reassuring him that she wasn't involved in anything that would require a follow-up. As Flair finished speaking, Kane's attention shifted. He noticed that Shiana's expression had subtly changed when he mentioned magic. Leaning in, he quietly asked if she was all right. Before she could reply, a maid appeared in the doorway. Noting the late hour, she politely suggested that perhaps Adele-sama should stay for the night. The offer caught him off guard. He quickly protested, insisting that Flair-sama must be busy with her duties and that they should leave. He added that it would be too stressful to worry about the Explosion Saintess' short fuse the next day. Despite his objections, the matter was settled. As Flair and Shirana walked ahead, Flair cheerfully commented on how spacious and wonderful the bath was. Shirana agreed it sounded enjoyable, prompting a frustrated shout from Kane, telling them not to raise his expectations so casually. His outburst was met by the arrival of a distinguished older gentleman. The man, Baron, introduced himself and informed Adele-sama that he would be their guide. A flustered Kane managed a quiet word of thanks. The butler then addressed their accommodations. Seeing Kane slumped on the floor in defeat, he glanced between him and Shirana and asked if they would be sharing a bedroom, before adding with unassailable authority that the matter was already decided. In a grand, ornate bathing chamber, Flair Lescart soaks in the warm water, her expression troubled. She emerges, wrapping a towel around herself, but the pensive look remains, her thoughts clearly weighing heavily upon her. Elsewhere, a maid attends to her mistress, Adele-sama. The maid speaks with concern, stating that while she doesn't know what to do about a certain person, for now, they must proceed with their current discussion. In response, her mistress's hand clenches into a tight fist. The scene shifts to a library, where Kane stands at the entrance. He looks towards someone inside and asks if they have completed the task he requested earlier. He is met by Shirana, who flashes a cheerful okay sign. She confirms that the status appraisal for the Saintess is perfectly done. Kane thanks her, though his expression is distant as he recalls how Flair's demeanor had suddenly changed when the topic of magic was brought up. Now seated together on a sofa, he asks Shirana why she would check on such a thing. He explains that he asked her to appraise Flair because something felt off, a concern that had been bothering him. Across the room, Flair is seen from behind, her posture rigid with tension. Shirana reveals the results of the appraisal. Flair's status shows a magic value of Light 0, Dark 3, and Recovery 0. She has a skill called Berserk and a title, Beloved by the Evil God. Kane is stunned, questioning what this status means and why an evil god is involved. He dismisses Shiana's suggestion that Flair might be a follower, insisting the great goddess she served would never permit it. His mind races as he processes the information. While cults dedicated to evil gods might exist, the more immediate problem is her magical aptitude. With her light and recovery levels at 0, and no aptitude for fire magic on top of that, her abilities make no sense. He continues his line of thought, considering the title of Saintess. That role is supposed to be granted only to those who achieve a certain level in light or recovery magic. He wonders aloud how, then, she is able to cause explosions with magic. Shirana agrees that it's strange. She explains that, as far as she knows, it should be impossible to cause an explosion with explosion magic without having an aptitude for fire magic. Kane is taken aback by her definitive statement. She then presents a terrifying theory. If a person with a negative aptitude for an element tries to force the use of that magic, it's said that it can trigger a massive explosion. The implication hangs in the air, and Kane's eyes widen in shock. He found the concept difficult to grasp, asking Shirana if a negative aptitude was truly possible. From her bed, the witch admitted she had never seen such a thing and couldn't say for certain. This contradicted everything he knew from his past life. In the game, magic aptitude never dropped into the negatives. He mulled over the inconsistencies. Flare had no aptitude for fire, yet she caused explosions. She was chosen as a saintess, yet her aptitude for light and recovery magic was 0. And then there was the most unsettling piece of the puzzle, the existence of the evil god. Meanwhile, Flare herself was in turmoil. She had been wondering for some time if something was amiss with her own status. If these suspicions were connected to the explosion, she knew she had to speak with him. The following day, Kane stood with Adele near the desolate expanse known as the Land of the Dead. Adele, looking around at the barren landscape, questioned why he had brought her to such a place. He explained that this was precisely the reason. The area was so desolate and shunned that it was colloquially known as the Land of the Dead, a place few people ever dared to approach. She pressed him, asking why they had traveled so far from the mansion. Turning slightly, he stated that he had something to tell her, something that could only be discussed in this isolated location. Her expression softened with concern. "Are you troubled by something?" she asked, acknowledging his sharp perception. As she called his name, he turned to face her fully. "Whatever I'm about to tell you," he began, his gaze intense, "you must keep it secret." Her composure broke, her eyes widening in shock. "Please, help me," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I have no one else to turn to." With a gentle smile, Flare Lesgard explained that she had felt something was amiss from the very beginning, and that her current travels were simply to broaden her horizons by visiting various lands. She continued, recounting how she had appeared in the territory without any prior notice, earning her the label of a nuisance. Her expression had soured, she admitted, when the topic of magic was broached. A status assessment revealed the truth of her situation. Her magic values were 0 for light and recovery, but 3 for dark. She possessed a skill called madness and the title loved by the evil god. Kane recalled what Shirana, an expert on the subject, had once explained. A person who cannot use recovery and light magic would never be chosen as a saintess. Furthermore, if someone with no aptitude for a certain attribute tried to force that magic, it could trigger a massive, catastrophic explosion. He pieced it together. If that was the reason for her strange behavior, and if she was the one who caused the explosion in the city in the game, then he had to ask. The danger was too great to ignore. Extending a hand, he asked her directly if something was troubling her. His question hung in the desolate, rocky landscape between them. Flare looked back at him, puzzled. "Help? What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Her composure finally broke. With a look of shock and distress, she confessed the truth. "Actually, several months ago, I suddenly became unable to use magic." He pressed on, confirming his suspicions. "When you were granted the title of Saintess, you could use both recovery and light magic. So, just as I thought, your worries are related to magic, aren't they?" He recalled the sequence of events. For a time, she had hidden her poor condition, blaming it on the Great Temple. But there was a limit to how long she could continue the facade. He remembered seeing her desperately studying magic from the basics, poring over ancient texts to no avail. It was then that he had heard the rumors about Adele. Flare confirmed his thoughts. "I heard a rumor," she said, her hands clasped nervously, "that the daughter of the Lord of Redrick had suddenly become able to use magic. Clinging to that sliver of hope, I came here." Her words clicked into place, and a chilling realization dawned on Kane. He finally understood why she had come to their territory. She was trying to avoid her own destruction by training in magic. But in doing so, she had triggered a different, unforeseen catastrophe. As the thought crossed his mind, a dark, ominous energy began to rumble and rise from the very ground around her. He stares at her, realization dawning. Flare, her voice soft, asks why he revealed his efforts. She then makes a plea. If it is not too much trouble, she wants him to teach her how he, Adele, became able to use magic. His mind flashes back to his own struggles. He remembers that he, with a magic aptitude of 0, could only cast spells thanks to a magical tool he purchased from Shirana. The memory of facing a monstrous wolf, armed only with a small ring, is still fresh. His own magical potential was non-existent, with a negative growth rate. He recalls the day he and Shirana visited her room and bought the ring. She had explained it was a tool specifically for using recovery magic. The thought of parting with it is agonizing. He clenches his fist in frustration. He knows this is the way for her to use recovery magic, but it comes at a great personal cost. The internal conflict tears at him. This is a rare item, one he'll likely never find again. Giving it to Flare means sacrificing his own ability to use recovery magic for the rest of his life. A silent apology to Mina forms in his thoughts. His turmoil is visible on his face. Noticing his distress, Flare quickly apologizes for asking something so difficult. She promises that whatever method he used to learn magic, she will never speak of it to anyone. With tears welling in her eyes, she insists she will do anything he asks if he will just teach her. He looks at her, weighing the consequences. Leaving her, as she is, with her power suppressed by the ring, carries the constant risk of a catastrophic explosion. He cannot allow that to happen. He makes his choice. He sees her desperation. Flare feels that if things continue this way, her very purpose in the world will vanish. Taking a breath, he looks at her and says firmly, "I understand." Her head snaps up, hope and disbelief warring in her expression as she asks if he is truly serious. He offers a reassuring smile, explaining that while he cannot guarantee she will be able to use magic exactly as she did before, he does have a plan. A part of her resists the idea of being indebted to him, but gratitude overwhelms her pride. "Thank you," she thinks, her relief palpable. Later, in a desolate, rocky clearing, he stands before Flare, flanked by Adele and the maid. He begins, "First, I will present this magical tool to you, Lady Flare." He holds out his hand, presenting the small, dark-gemmed ring to Flare. He explains that it is a magical tool with the power to heighten the wearer's aptitude for magic just by putting it on. Flare, taken aback, insists she cannot accept something so valuable. Nearby, Adele and her young elven attendant watch the exchange. The attendant quietly asks if the item is a magical tool, and Adele confirms that it is. Adele explains with a gentle smile that if the ring helps Flare use her magic, it's a small price to pay. He adds that it will also help erase his own death flag. Flare, taken aback by the gesture, blushes deeply, her expression a mix of surprise and delight. He then asks for her hand so he can place the ring. Flare eagerly agrees. Adele, holding the ring, then asks which finger she would prefer, causing her to hesitate in confusion. Despite her confusion, she nervously presents her hand to him, her fingers trembling slightly. He takes her hand and gently slides the small, ornate ring onto the fourth finger of her left hand. The moment is quiet and focused, with Flare watching him, her blush deepening. He holds her hand, looking down at the ring he just placed. A thought crosses his mind as he wonders aloud why he chose this particular finger, the left ring finger. His musing is interrupted by Flare's sheer delight. She exclaims that this is the first time a man has ever given her a ring. Adele internally reflects that a saintess likely wouldn't be accustomed to wearing accessories. Gazing at the ring on her finger with a radiant smile, Flare vows to treasure it always. Her joy brings a warm smile to his face. He tells her that seeing her happy makes him happy as well. And then, with sincere intensity, he urges her to truly rely on him. With the ring now on her finger, he begins to explain its properties. He clarifies that while its effect is only elementary, it is designed to enable Flare to use recovery magic. She waves her hand with a cheerful expression, asking if he's sure it will work. He encourages her to try using the recovery magic right away. Flare looks around the empty, rocky landscape, confused, and asks what she should use it on, pointing out that there is no one injured nearby. Her logical question is met with a startling answer. Adele produces a sharp knife, his expression one of cheerful determination. "I'll use this," he declares. The young elven attendant, who had been standing quietly behind him, looks on in absolute shock as he confirms his intention. He ignored their pleas. Flare begged him to stop, her voice trembling, while his young attendant tried to intervene, insisting it was too dangerous and urging Flare to move away. But Flare could only stare, whispering Adele's name in horrified disbelief. Ignoring them completely, he drove the knife into his own palm. With a grimace of determination, he declared that if there was no one injured, he would simply have to create an injury himself. Below him, Flare gasped in horror, her hand flying to her mouth. He then presented the bleeding hand to Flare, urging her to try using recovery magic. He dismissed the injury as nothing serious, reminding her that she would be the one to heal it anyway. Flare, however, hesitated, stammering that she couldn't. Her mind flashed back to a traumatic past failure. She remembered a crying child, distraught parents, and the weight of blame as a man pointed an accusing finger at her. The memory of being called useless again echoed in her thoughts, paralyzing her. Sensing her turmoil, Adele gently placed a hand on her shoulder, bringing her back to the present. He looked at her with a warm, reassuring smile, telling her it would be all right. He insisted that she could do it, and all she needed to do was believe in herself. Flare stared back, her eyes wide with surprise and a dawning sense of hope. His simple, earnest encouragement resonated deep within her, and a warm blush spread across her cheeks as she processed his faith in her. She found it strange. Hearing those words from Adele made her feel like everything truly would be okay. With newfound resolve, she agreed and reached out, gently taking his wounded hand in hers. Her expression softened, her cheeks still flushed, but her eyes now held a gentle determination, ready to channel her power. A powerful feeling surged through her. The warmth from Adele's shoulder, his kindness, it all coalesced into a single, overwhelming desire. I want to heal him. She began to focus, calling upon her power to answer her plea and bestow its blessing upon this gentle person. She focused her will, crying out the single word for recovery. A brilliant, warm light erupted from her palms, enveloping Adele's injured hand. The light coalesced into a complex, glowing magical sigil that flared to life before him, bathing the area in its pure, white luminescence. She watched, wide-eyed and breathless, at the overwhelming display of power she had just unleashed. As she stared, Adele examined his hand, his voice filled with wonder as he confirmed the wound was completely gone. In the background, Flare began to weep silently, tears of relief dripping onto the ground. A single thought filled her mind. She was so glad she had trusted in Adele. Her silent weeping turned into audible sobs of profound relief. With her hands clasped before her face, she expressed her overwhelming gratitude, thanking him again and again. He met her tearful gratitude with a gentle, reassuring smile, telling her that it was nothing. He was simply happy that he could be useful to her. Adele gently touched her stomach, the warmth of the healing magic still lingering. She murmured Kane's name, her heart aching at the thought that he had given up a precious item and even wounded himself just to save her. As she reflected on his sacrifice, Kane's mind conjured an idealized image of Flare Lescart, her face flushed with adoration. In this fantasy, she thought of him as a magnificent hero, and he struck a confident, charming pose, basking in her imagined praise. The pleasant daydream shattered instantly. A jolt of terror shot through Kane as the reality of the situation crashed down upon him. He had almost died. The shot gave way to a wave of relief. He internally recounted the events. Stabbing himself with a knife for the first time was an intensely deep and unpleasant sensation. He had worried Flare might try to use her magic on him, but his own low aptitude was precisely what had saved them. The mystery of her curse was solved, and he had narrowly avoided death. He vowed to himself that he was done with such painful experiences. His internal reflection concluded, and he turned his attention to Flare. He explained that while the immediate threat was gone, the destruction flag wasn't entirely averted. The possibility of an explosion still remained if she were to use light magic. His explanation, however, was overheard by Adele. She pointed out a flaw in his long-term situation, noting that if he continued to use the ring to cast recovery magic, his own magic power would gradually increase. She then asked him what he intended to do about that. He had already considered this and laid out his plan with confidence. He stated that repetition was crucial, so they would return to the Great Temple to train. With that decided, he suggested they wrap things up and depart. Her eyes widened as she processed the full implication of his words. A blush spread across her face as she realized he meant to repeatedly injure himself so she could heal him, all to raise his level. Does that mean? She began, her voice trembling slightly. The thought was too much for her. Absolutely not, she exclaimed, her face burning with a mixture of embarrassment and concern. I could never ask you to injure yourself over and over again just for my sake. Don't even say such a thing. Her vehement refusal caught him completely off guard. He threw his hands up defensively, stammering as he tried to correct the misunderstanding. No, Adele-sama. He found himself face to face with a blushing Flare Lescart, who declared she would accompany him for as many sessions as it took. She vowed not to let Adele's feelings be in vain, promising to stay until his magic was completely depleted. She continued with unnerving enthusiasm, her eyes sparkling as she asked him to take out a knife. Seeing his hesitation, she even offered to do the cutting herself. In the background, Kane could only stare in wide-eyed terror at the escalating misunderstanding. Her cheerful voice echoed, telling him to bear with it as she was on her way, the sound of her hurried footsteps accompanying her words. Moments later, the group stood before a grand, wrought-iron gate. A magnificent carriage, hitched to 2 white horses, waited to take Flare away. Kane, Adele, and the head butler Baron stood together, seeing her off. As Flare was seen off, one of Adele's attendants placed a reassuring hand on Kane's shoulder, noting that he could finally be at ease. Reflected in a nearby mirror, Flare graciously thanked Adele for her hospitality. Standing by the carriage, Flare turned to Kane, explaining that she had just remembered something. She never had the chance to properly thank him for saving her back when she couldn't use her magic, a time when she was supposed to meet a certain person. She then mentioned that this person had been introduced to her by the church's head priest. Though her memory of the events was hazy, she thought the priest might know something. Kane listened intently, realizing this was a potential lead. He thanked her for the information, smiling. He mused internally that while the Great Temple wasn't directly involved with his own situation, it was information worth remembering. With Flare now able to use magic again, he had no reason to see her, and he looked forward to a period of peace. Just as she was about to board the carriage, Kane turned his attention away from the departing Flare and called out to Adele, who looked back at him, her expression somber. He asked, with simple innocence, if it would be all right for him to come and see her again. The question struck Adele like a lightning bolt, leaving her speechless and blushing furiously. Behind them, Kane looked shocked by her reaction, while her entire retinue stared in a mixture of stunned silence and outright fury. She stammers, completely flustered by the sudden turn of events. Her attendant, however, answers for her with a resounding "of course." Kane looks on, utterly bewildered, while Baron is struck speechless by the declaration. Adele, blushing furiously, can only manage to ask if Kane is truly serious. The misunderstanding had its roots just moments before, as they bid farewell to Flare. The Saintess waved from her doorway, while Baron assured her she was always welcome to visit. Kane, standing beside Adele, reflected internally on the surprising bond he had formed with such a renowned figure. He watched as Flare, with a bright smile, promised she would absolutely come to see them again. The thought lingered in his mind, her promise to visit, and the ring he had given her. It was this sequence of events that led to his innocent but catastrophic question to Adele. The question triggered an immediate and violent reaction from Adele's retinue. In Kane's terrified imagination, he saw them descending upon him, knives drawn and eyes glowing with murderous intent, all to enact Adele's correction. A wave of dread washed over him as he realized, again, as the chaos of the misunderstanding swirled, Baron turned to Adele in concern, asking if she was all right. The overwhelming stress was too much for her. She promptly fainted and collapsed. The incident was so severe that she remained bedridden for an entire week afterward. On the East Highway, Kane, Adele, and Mina travel along a dusty road. Mina's voice cuts through the quiet, a weary groan as she asks if they have much further to go to reach their destination. She throws her arms up in frustration, complaining that they've been walking for some time and she's getting tired. Beside her, Kane's expression is one of weary patience. Her outburst earns a sharp rebuke from Adele, who calls her an impatient brat. Kane quickly steps in, defending Mina by admitting that he was the one who kept telling her they were almost there. Just then, his demeanor changes completely. A bright smile spreads across his face as he points forward, urging them both to look. He announces cheerfully that he can see it. Their destination is just ahead. Nestled in a clearing surrounded by dense forest are several rustic wooden buildings. This is the objective they've been traveling towards, the hidden hideout of a local thieves' guild. The scene shifts, flashing back several days. Kane sits indoors, holding a cup, recalling the inception of this plan and his thoughts on heading east. In the memory, he clarifies his intentions to Adele and Mina. When they ask if he means the Landhill border territory, he explains that he has no plans to go that far. He points out that the Raedric territory is weak and lacks defensive power, making it the perfect place to strike first, especially given the recent conflicts in the surrounding lands. His thoughts are tinged with caution as he considers the possibility of another irregular event, like the sudden appearance of the explosion Saintess, Flare Lescard. The memory of her unsettling, intense gaze causes a shiver of apprehension to run through him. He steels his resolve, understanding that the events of the game he remembers are merely a guideline. His first priority must be to increase their military strength, to build a force capable of responding flexibly to any unforeseen circumstances. This current mission, he determines, is the first step toward that goal. Returning to the past conversation, he lays out his logic for the others. He dismisses the idea of heading east immediately, questioning its purpose. Hiring regular soldiers would be too costly, he argues, and more importantly, it would attract the unwanted attention of the surrounding nobles, provoking them unnecessarily. He explained his strategy, pointing to a map of the area. His target was a thieves' guild, which he'd learned was hiding just beyond the Easter streets. The objective, he declared, was to persuade them to become his mercenaries. This was, of course, information he possessed from his previous life's knowledge of the game. He knew that if things remained unchanged, the villainess would also be at that hideout. A nearby maid, overhearing the plan, seemed puzzled. She questioned if this was truly about the thieves' guild, suggesting it was not just for military reinforcement, but also a countermeasure against a ruined flat. Adele then voiced her own concerns, noting that other servants were being paid to live like slaves, and questioning how Kane could so easily hire them. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, urging her to trust him and acknowledging that some things are unavoidable. When asked who would be going, Kane confirmed that he and Mina would undertake the mission. Adele accepted his decision. He then turned to Melchia, asking her to remain behind this time. She expressed her worry about the children going alone, though she understood his desire to avoid attention. At that moment, Kane's mother intervened, telling Melchia not to be concerned and reminding her that they had Shiana's magic as a failsafe. Filled with sudden confidence, Adele beamed. She declared that with the sword forged for her by Baron, Kane should feel as secure as if he were on a great ship, and she urged him to be bold. Slightly taken aback by her intense enthusiasm, he could only manage a simple thank you in agreement. Adele nodded, satisfied. He then turned his attention back to Melchia, who smiled warmly. She announced that she would put her skills to use by preparing a packed lunch for their journey. Kane's composure broke as he realized this was not a picnic. His thoughts were interrupted as Mina and the maid appeared, asking if they needed anything. Mina excitedly suggested bringing a meat pie, completely misreading the gravity of the situation. Surveying the tranquil forest clearing, Adele, now dressed in a formal suit, asks if this is the bandits' hideout. Beside her, Mina the witch stands ready. Kane observes the peaceful scene, thinking to himself that it's nothing like the bloody landscape he remembers from the game. Their quiet assessment is cut short as two rough-looking men emerge from the trees, announcing that their pursuers have finally arrived. The men seem taken aback. The one wearing a bandana questions why children are in such a place, while his companion urges him not to be hasty. The first bandit then asks if they are the ones Adele-sama had mentioned. Kane internally notes that there are only two of them, and that a certain man from the game is conspicuously absent. The bandit in the bandana dismisses them, warning that monsters lurk nearby and they should leave quickly. However, his companion stops him, telling him to wait and take a closer look at their clothing. His companion points out how well-dressed the trio is. This confirms Kane's suspicion. They look like children of nobility or their retainers. A smirk spreads across the spiky-haired man's face as a plan forms. He suggests they capture the children and demand a ransom from their parents, explaining that they are poor and need the money to survive. He warns the group to cooperate to avoid getting hurt as his men draw their swords, surrounding the trio. As the bandits charge, shouting their resentment for those born into nobility, Kane remains perfectly calm. He thinks that he would have preferred to avoid this, then issues a clear command. Adele, neutralize them but don't kill them. In a flash, Adele draws her sword and lunges forward. She moves with blinding speed. Before the bandits can react, she strikes the man in the bandana with the flat of her blade, sending him stumbling back with a grunt of pain. Both men are stunned by her power. Kane watches the display, unsurprised. He knew from their daily sword training how this would end. Mina, however, looks on with concern, realizing that Adele is cornering the humans and that the situation could turn ugly for them. Gritting his teeth, the bandit parries another of Adele's swift strikes. She presses the attack relentlessly, her blade a blur as she completely overwhelms her opponent. With the bandits defeated and unable to stand, Adele holds her position, her expression stern. Melchia suddenly appears, her face flushed with admiration as she praises Kane for a job well done. Kane, meanwhile, is surprised by how much stronger Adele has become. Adele, however, seems slightly irritated by the exchange. As the dust settled, the commotion attracted more of the bandits. 3 more men approached, their expressions hardening as they saw their defeated comrades. One of them, clearly in charge, stepped forward and demanded an explanation from the bandit with the bandana, asking what they were doing while he was away on watch. The bandits' gaze shifted to Kane's party. They were stunned to see who had bested their man. A small boy, a girl in a suit, and another young girl in a witch's hat. One of the bandits scoffed, finding it shameful to be defeated by such a young girl. Nearby, Melchia observed to Mina that more enemies had appeared, all of them alike. Mina, her expression serious, wondered aloud what they were to do with such a child, her eyes fixed on the scene. Their derision was abruptly silenced. In a flash of power, a towering figure materialized before them. The Witch of Calamity, Shirana. Her imposing presence stunned the bandits into silence. Kane stared up in disbelief, shouting that this was no child. Looking down upon them all, Shirana simply smiled and asked, "How do you like this?" Before the astonished bandits, Shirana transforms into her adult form. The men are immediately captivated, one exclaiming what a fine woman she is. Kane, too, is taken aback by the sudden change. Shirana smiles, remarking to herself that it has been some time since she used her illusion magic to assume this appearance. She flashes a charming smile at the mesmerized men, assuring them she has no ill intentions. As they gawk, completely enthralled, thick, shadowy tentacles erupt from the earth behind them, unnoticed. In an instant, the tentacles seize the bandits, hoisting them upside down into the air amidst cries of shock. Watching the spectacle, Adele laughs heartily, remarking that with his few opponents, it was hardly a challenge. Kane observes the scene quietly from beneath his hood. Her amusement fades as she turns to Shirana, however, sternly questioning why she would use her illusion magic on a child. Adele reminds her that she, too, is just a child and shouldn't be subjected to such things. Shirana retorts that Kane is no child and is still alive, reminding Adele that her true mission lies elsewhere. Their argument is cut short by a man's voice calling out from the path ahead. A figure in armor has appeared, demanding to know what they are doing. The armored man's gaze sweeps over the scene, landing on his men hanging helplessly. He addresses Kane directly, asking what happened. Kane, suspicious, asks if he is one of the bandits' companions. The man narrows his eyes, a thoughtful expression on his face. Without a word, he draws his sword. A single, powerful slash severs the magical tentacles, sending the bandits tumbling to the ground. Adele realizes with a start that this must be their leader. Shirana notes with surprise that he cut through her magic-infused bonds with one strike. The man, Randall Baldus, immediately lunges at Adele. She raises her sword just in time to parry his ferocious downward blow. Before she can counter, he pivots and lands a heavy kick to her midsection, launching her through the air. She slams against a tree and crumples to the ground, clutching her side. The strength difference is immense, far greater than she anticipated. From short distance away, Kane watches and quietly apologizes to her. Ignoring the defeated Adele, Randall turns his intense gaze on the rest of the group. To their astonishment, he declares that he wants to join them, no matter what. He then demands to know why they have come here. He begins to explain his past, recalling a time when he served as a knight for the kingdom. He witnessed firsthand the rampant injustice within the noble society, a world where the powerful reveled while the common folk were oppressed. Disgusted by this corruption, he abandoned his post and fled the country, which led him to his current life. He then declares that his purpose in coming here was specifically to meet Kane. The boy, taken aback, realizes he needs to handle this conversation carefully. He addresses the former knight, acknowledging his past affiliation with the Royal Knights and asking what he wants from him. His question is met with confusion. Randall asks what he means, assuming Kane must be affiliated with the kingdom. From a short distance away, Adele frantically interjects, shouting that his assumption is wrong. Randall turns, startled by her outburst. Before he can process it, Kane steps forward, his expression resolute, and makes his own intentions clear. He declares loudly that he wants to hire Randall as his personal retainer. Standing before the group of bandits, Kane formally introduces himself as Adelheid, son of Lord Lydric. He addresses their leader directly, stating that the man's skill with a sword is known even in his own territory. Kane then extends an offer, asking why someone of his caliber is wasting away as a common thief when he could be working for him. One of the bandits looks on, muttering his leader's name in surprise. The leader, Randolph, turns to face the boy, his expression hardening. He questions how Kane could possibly know who he is, and more pointedly, how he knows the reason he deserted the knightly order. Kane remains silent, his gaze steady. His skepticism curdles into fury. Randolph scoffs at the idea of working for a noble, accusing them of levying taxes for the people only to enrich themselves. He spits that nobles are nothing but scum, a sentiment he seems to hold for all of them. He turns his back, his voice rising with indignation as he demands to know what kind of sacrifices the common folk must make to pay those taxes. He declares vehemently that he did not hone his skills with a blade just to serve such corrupt individuals. Whirling around with his hand on his sword, Randolph roars that he would rather kill every last noble himself. He orders Kane to leave immediately. From a distance, Adele watches with concern, realizing the depth of Randolph's hatred for the aristocracy. His fist clenches tightly at his side. Randolph seethes with frustration, having come all this way only to be rejected solely on the basis of his noble birth. As Randolph stews, one of his men asks if he's really going to let them go. Another bandit interjects, noting that the boy seems different from the other nobles in the region, but Randolph cuts him off with a sharp command to be quiet. Nearby, Adele asks Kane if he's disappointed. He assures her he is fine and suggests they leave for the day to try again later. As he turns to depart, a violent tremor shakes the ground, catching him completely by surprise. His eyes widen in shock as he whips his head around. The source of the tremor reveals itself. A massive, horned, bear-like monster crashes into the clearing with a deafening roar. The bandits cry out in terror. Kane is stunned, recognizing that a monster of such a high level should not be this far down from the mountains. At the same time, Adele recalls Randolph mentioning something about bringing a monster with him. Randolph curses under his breath, realizing the beast must have been drawn by the scent of monster blood on him. He whirls around, shouting at the bandits and Kane's group to flee if they value their lives. Stepping forward, he resolves to handle the creature himself. As Randolph faced the beast, Adele turned to Kane, insisting they must flee at once. Sharana, with a confident smile, offered a simpler solution. She could just blow the creature away with her magic. Before she could act, Kane stopped her, telling her to wait. His expression darkened, a subtle, calculating smile forming as he considered Randolph's actions. Adele, watching him, couldn't comprehend the situation, questioning why someone who had just threatened to kill them would now sacrifice himself for their protection. He then moved decisively, stepping in front of the astonished Randolph with a fierce look, his fangs visible. This, he realized, was the perfect chance to win the man over as an ally. With his hand held out, he commanded his companions to prepare themselves. They were joining Randolph in the battle. With a sudden burst of light emphasizing his declaration, Kane steps forward with his hand raised, announcing to everyone present that he and his companions will join forces with Randolph. His decision is met with immediate confusion. Sharana questions his intent to join them, while a panicked Adele warns him of the danger. She reminds him that these are the same men who try to take them hostage, arguing that there is no reason to risk their lives for such people. He turns to Adele with a gentle smile, explaining his reasoning. While he admits they certainly have no obligation to the bandits, he states that he cannot simply ignore people who are in trouble right before his eyes. Adele seems momentarily speechless. She blushes, flustered, asking if that is truly his only reason. Kane strikes a determined pose, clarifying that there's more to it. He exclaims that Randolph's defeat is an unacceptable destruction flag that must be avoided, and he is relieved to have noticed it in time. Meanwhile, the bandits face their adversary. A colossal, dark-furred wolf with glowing eyes and a maw full of sharp teeth lets out a low growl, its hot breath misting in the air. The men stare, frozen with terror. Their leader, Randolph, grits his teeth, questioning how such a monster could be in this location. Before him looms the hulking, horned silhouette of the beast, its presence radiating immense pressure. He recognizes the creature as a boss-level monster for the region, one that should normally reside much deeper in the mountains. He wonders aloud why it has descended from its usual territory. He resolves himself for the coming clash. Acknowledging it will be a difficult fight he cannot afford to lose, he turns to his subordinates. He orders them to stand back, declaring that he will face the beast alone. The monster unleashes a deafening roar, its massive jaws gaping open. The bandits flinch back in pure terror, one cursing at the overwhelming sight. Ignoring his command, his men charge forward with swords raised, intending to overwhelm the beast with numbers. Randolph throws out a hand, yelling at them to stop, warning them not to be so foolish as to think they could defeat it. He braced himself, blocking the monster's vicious claw swipe with his sword. The impact sent a shockwave through the ground, and he clicked his tongue in frustration at the creature's overwhelming power. The force of the blow sent him skidding backward, his boots digging into the dirt as he struggled to remain upright. His men cried out his name in alarm as the beast swung its massive arm for another attack. His subordinates rushed to his side as he fell to one knee, leaning on his sword for support. One apologized, blaming himself for their leader's predicament. Randall, however, cut him off, ordering them all to escape while they had the chance. One of the men began to protest, unwilling to leave him behind. He roared at them to run, his voice strained. As he shouted, he clutched his arm, a searing pain shooting through it, a pain he felt deep in his bones. His men could only watch, their faces etched with despair and helplessness. While the bandits were paralyzed by indecision, the hulking monster took a heavy step forward, its glowing eyes fixed on its prey. From a short distance away, Kane observed the tense standoff. Kneeling before the beast, Randall grimaced. He realized the previous attack had struck a nerve, leaving him vulnerable. Even at his best, this opponent would have been formidable. He gritted his teeth, a single thought consuming him. Was this the end? In that moment of despair, a fleeting memory surfaced, the bright, smiling face of a young girl. The vision was instantly shattered as the monster lunged forward for the kill. At that exact instant, a voice called out, invoking a spell, water. A powerful blast of water slammed directly into the monster's head, forcing it back with a roar of pain. Stunned, Randall looked over his shoulder, trying to comprehend the sudden turn of events. Kane stood there, staff held ready, confirming he had arrived just in time. Randall, recognizing the boy, demanded to know why he hadn't fled. Kane simply replied that he couldn't just ignore someone being attacked by a monster right in front of him. The scene shifts away from the immediate confrontation to a quiet settlement of rustic wooden buildings nestled against a dense forest. A moment of stunned silence hangs in the air, punctuated by an exclamation of disbelief. Then, the voice of the bandit leader, Randall, cuts through, his tone laced with concern. He ignores his own miraculous recovery, instead asking about the boy's well-being and the injuries he might have sustained. The massive, horned beast snarls, its rage-filled eyes fixated solely on Kane. Mina observes the creature's focused aggression, noting that its hate seems directed specifically at the boy, who flinches under the intense glare. In response to the threat, Adele draws her sword and steps in front of Kane, ordering him to stand back. She declares her intent to protect the common folk. Nearby, the bandit leader, Randall, expresses his annoyance, remarking that he knew the nobles wouldn't simply flee and abandon everyone. She charges forward, her blade clashing against the monster's tough hide in a shower of sparks. Adele calls out to Kane, asking him to buy her some time to deal with the beast. He affirms his readiness to help. Her assault is futile. The beast swats her aside with a powerful blow, sending her reeling. As she is thrown to the ground, Kane cries out her name in alarm. Just as the monster looms over the fallen Adele for a final strike, Randall intercepts the attack, blocking the massive claw with his own sword. He shouts at her for being careless, as Kane calls out the bandit leader's name in surprise. He then turns his attention to Kane, demanding why the boy is just standing there injured. Randall roars at him to use his magic to deliver the finishing blow. The demand forces Kane to confront his own limitations. He knows his strongest spell, a simple water bullet, is nowhere near powerful enough to defeat this creature. He grips his staff, wondering what he can possibly do. In that moment of desperation, a memory of Mina surfaces. Her voice echoes in his mind, reminding him that he should be capable of using much higher-level magic. As he recalls her words, a surge of power courses through his entire body. His simple staff transforms into an ornate, crystal-topped scepter. He raises it and unleashes a torrent of magical energy, crying out the spell's name, Wave Fong. The blast erupts from the staff and engulfs the monster completely. The force of the spell slams the beast into the ground, where it lies motionless. Standing amidst the aftermath with a new staff in his hands, Kane stares at the fallen creature and quietly wonders if he was truly the one who defeated it. He is met with Shiana's utter astonishment. She questions what just happened, marveling at the incredible magic he displayed and exclaiming that it's unbelievable for him, the weakest among them, to have delivered the final blow to such a powerful monster. Meanwhile, the bandits who witnessed the display are equally stunned. Randall's men thank Kane for earning them some time, admitting they saw something amazing. The bandit leader himself remains silent, his expression a mixture of shock and contemplation. He, however, seems almost embarrassed by the attention. With a bright smile, he remarks that while it was surprising for a young child to defeat a monster, it was even more surprising to be thanked by a noble. The onlookers are taken aback by his cheerful declaration, while Randall simply grunts in response. The bandit leader then turns his back, looking out over the landscape. He reminds Kane that the boy had previously stated a desire to be hired as his mercenary. He then reveals a critical piece of his own story. As Kane already knows, he is an exile, cast out from the Knights Order of the Kingdom. This revelation strikes Kane with sudden force. Randall continues, explaining that on top of his exile, he has earned the enmity of a faction of nobles for stealing their valuables. He turns to face the boy, his gaze intense. He questions Kane's resolve directly, asking if he truly wants to be hired, even knowing the risks and the burden Randall carries. Without a moment's hesitation, Kane calls out for him to wait. Before he can continue, Randall's men speak up in their leader's defense. One confirms that while Randall did steal from the nobles, it was only from the most corrupt among them. The other passionately explains that Randall was exiled from the kingdom for the sole purpose of creating a place where commoners could live with dignity, and that he distributed the stolen goods to the poor. They insist that their leader is not a common thief and is, in fact, a great man. Their passionate defense culminates in a unified plea. The entire group of bandits bows low to the ground before the small boy, begging him to be hired as a mercenary for their leader. Randall can only watch, stunned by his own men's actions. With a bright, unwavering smile, Kane tells the man before him to lift his head. He insists that even without being asked, his desire for the man to join him remains unchanged. The bandit leader, Randall, rises to his feet, explaining the potential consequences. He warns that by hiring him, Kane might attract the scorn of certain nobles, as his people are from a borderland that is intentionally overlooked. However, he trails off, implying there is more to consider. He is met with a challenging gaze from the boy. Kane asks if Randall will train him personally once he has earned his place. He then questions the state of a world that disregards its own people, declaring that if this is how things are, he will one day show the corrupt nobles a world transformed. His conviction solid, Kane extends his hand in a formal gesture. He makes his offer clear. If Randall truly wishes to save his people, then he should come and serve him. He names the man directly, Randall Baldus. The bandit leader is visibly stunned by the boy's audacity and the weight of his words, his mind reeling at the directness of the child's gaze. He regains his composure, a wry smile forming. He asks if Kane's words are a lie, then sets his terms. The moment he feels Kane has become just another noble, he will leave. Furthermore, if Kane ever seems to be breaking his promise, Randall will remove him without hesitation. To this, Kane simply agrees. He extends his hand once more, and Randall clasps it firmly, sealing their pact. The bandit leader warns him not to forget his words. Moments later, back at the makeshift camp, Randall's subordinates express their relief. A woman with short dark hair exclaims that it's wonderful, admitting she had been worried about them. Another bandit agrees enthusiastically. The woman then approaches Sharana, asking for her name and questioning if she is Adele's sister. With a sly smile, Sharana leans in and playfully asks if the woman is interested in her master. Her question leaves the woman flustered and speechless, while the bandit next to her gulps nervously. From a short distance, Kane calls out to Sharana, asking when she became his companion and telling her to stop teasing their new allies. He watched, surprised, as Shiana's form shifted before him. She stood confidently, her appearance now that of a fully grown woman. She questioned if he was teasing her, stating that this was her true form. While she had high expectations, she admitted to having a bad feeling about it all, much to the bewilderment of the nearby bandits. With a faint smile, she revealed that her previous, more petite appearance was merely an illusion. The image of her younger self shattered like glass, leaving the bandits gaping in disbelief. Kane clenched his fist, now understanding the nature of her magic. With the revelation behind them, the newly formed group set out on their journey. It was decided they would all head for the Ladrid territory. After traveling for some time, they finally reached their destination. Kane, leading the cloaked figures, smiled brightly and announced their arrival. This was his domain, the Ladrid territory. From a high vantage point, they observed the peaceful town below. One of his new companions called out, remarking on the relaxed atmosphere of the streets. Kane accepted the observation as a compliment. He glanced back at the line of hooded figures, a thoughtful expression on his face. He reflected that despite the unexpected turn of events, successfully recruiting Randall and his people had been the right decision. A faint, knowing smirk touched his lips as he recalled his own words. He had gotten carried away and said something rather grand, a promise to show them a world where the people wouldn't have to suffer for the sake of corrupt nobles. His expression hardened with resolve as he corrected his own grandiose thoughts. He knew, of course, that he was not the one destined to guide the world to that future. That role belonged to the protagonist of the original game, Ardle's Miracle. He remembered the game's plot clearly. The corrupt noble society would eventually be transformed into a peaceful world. Therefore, his own objective was simple. He just had to avoid his own destruction flags until that time came. His path was set. For the sake of his own survival, he had to find this yet unseen protagonist. As Randall's people were led through the gates, he felt a sense of relief. The Royal Knights would not bother coming to such a remote borderland. For now, he could take his time. He stood on the cobblestone street with Randall when his attention was drawn to an unexpected sight ahead. An unfamiliar group clad in full armor was gathered there. Randall, equally taken aback, could only utter a shocked exclamation. His eyes widened in disbelief as he recognized the gleaming plate mail. It was the armor of the Royal Knights. A single, frantic thought echoed in his mind. Why would they possibly be in a remote place like this? Kane stares in disbelief at the figures before him. He immediately recognizes the armor of the Royal Knights, who have come all the way from the capital. A surge of panic rises as he wonders if they have already come to search for Randall. From his hiding spot, Randall grits his teeth. He had anticipated that pursuers would eventually come, but he is shocked by their sudden appearance at this exact moment. His eyes fix on the lead knight's armor, noting its unique color. Kane comes to a startling realization. This means the Knight Commander herself has come. The sight triggers a vivid memory from his past life. He recognizes the figure as a character from the original story, a member of the hero's party. A flush of excitement spreads across his face as he realizes he might get to meet the very character he used to control. As a maid informs him that the knights are entering the mansion, Randolph's hand clenches into a fist. He cannot allow them to have an audience with Randolph. Taking command, Kane turns to Shirena and declares that he will persuade the knights to leave. He then orders one of the bandits to take Randolph and the others to a place where they won't be found, an order which is quickly acknowledged. He rushes into the mansion's entrance hall, calling out for Baron and Melchia. They turn, surprised by his sudden return. Melchia points out that the armored group has arrived. A well-dressed man greets them warmly, identifying himself as Melchia's father. He notes their timely return, explaining that guests from the royal capital, the Royal Knights, have just arrived. The Knight Commander removes her helmet, revealing a young woman with short, wavy hair. She introduces herself as Kate Rosenberg. Kane is thunderstruck. He recognizes the name and face of Kate of the Flash, a major playable character from the game. Melchia's father gestures toward the reception room, inviting the party inside. He then turns to Knight Commander Rosenberg and politely asks what business has brought her all the way to this remote land. As Kane silently grapples with the reality of meeting the real Kate, he listens intently as the Knight Commander explains that she has come to investigate whether a fugitive has fled into their territory. She confirms their suspicions, stating that, as anticipated, they were pursuing Randolph. She continues, revealing that a disgraceful incident had occurred. A knight deserted his post. This man, she elaborates, was in command of the Bangladesh Knight Order and fled after stealing all of their funds. She then reveals the name of this deserter, Randolph Baldus. The name hits Kane with the force of a physical blow. He now understands the man he is harboring is also a thief. Melchia's father, however, remains composed, assuring the commander that they will overlook nothing and encouraging her to share even the smallest detail if she has any leads. Meanwhile, hidden elsewhere in the mansion, Randolph's men are enraged. One of them shouts that their leader had claimed they were seizing funds from corrupt nobles to give to the poor. Randolph listens, his expression grim. The weight of the situation presses down on Kane, who can only listen in from the other room, his face beaded with sweat. Back in the meeting, Kate Rosenberg expresses her own doubts, stating that Randolph has too strong a sense of justice to commit such a crime. Nevertheless, she declares the honor of the Knight Order is at stake. She is prepared for a direct confrontation with Randolph's unit, and warns that if the local lord's forces are involved, a massive army will descend upon the territory. The threat hangs heavy in the air, and Kane is struck with a horrifying realization. This land could be engulfed by the flames of war. Inside the manor, Kane attempts to reason with the armored knight commander, suggesting that since she is busy and he knows the territory well, it would be more efficient for him and his servants to look around on her behalf. His proposal is met with a furious rejection. The knight commander, Kate, declares that she will not be outdone and that her knights alone will search for Randolph. With a glare, she demands permission to search the territory. Despite her initial outburst, she quickly concedes, realizing there is no other choice. She announces her full cooperation, surprising Melchia's father. Kane, taken aback by the sudden reversal, asks if she is truly certain. He expresses his gratitude, stating that since the day is ending, they will accept the offer of a room and use it as a base for their search. With the matter settled, Melchia's father calls for his daughter to guide the three guests to their rooms. Melchia appears and leads the way for Kane, Kate, and another knight. Later, in the room designated as Adele's, Kane paces anxiously. He had asked Randolph's group to search for Kane, and now he worries that they might discover him during their search the next day. Meanwhile, in another room, Shirena remarks to Melchia that Adele has been acting strangely restless ever since they returned to their quarters. His agitation stems from a sudden, horrifying thought. If he is found so easily, it will raise suspicions. The realization hits him with force. As he spirals, Melchia's voice cuts through his panic. She asks if he would like to rest with some tea she has just prepared. Kane looks up, startled by her gentle offer. She holds out a cup, explaining that it is a herbal tea with a soothing effect. She suggests that relaxing might help calm his feelings, her expression one of pure kindness. She pulls the young boy into a comforting embrace, reassuring him that even if the villains manage to flee into the territory, the knights will surely take care of them. Kane, still in her arms, murmurs her name. Pulling back slightly, she pats his head with a warm smile, telling him everything is fine. She then remembers that she hasn't yet explained the situation to Randolph's group, making a mental note to speak with them properly later. As Kane sips his tea, a maid comments on Knight Commander Kate's personality, noting her seriousness and intolerance for injustice, just as she was in the original story. Kane pauses, a thought beginning to form. Nearby, Randolph confronts the Knight Commander directly, expressing his distrust. He argues that since they fled from someone they deemed corrupt, he has no reason to believe a monster like Kate wouldn't do the same. He turns to Melchia and her sister with a determined look. He admits he has a bad idea and asks if she would be willing to prepare another tea set for him. Melchia agrees without hesitation, though a hint of confusion crosses her face. Holding the teacup, a sudden realization dawns on him. The persistent feeling of unease, Kate's serious personality, and the very reason she, a Knight Commander, came to search for him personally. It all connects. He believes he has found a potential breakthrough and resolves to speak with the Knight Commander. Inside her private quarters, Knight Commander Kate Rosenberg slammed her hand against a vanity, her face contorted in frustration. She muttered the name Randolph, vexed that her search for him had yielded nothing. Her frustration stemmed from a fruitless search throughout the territory. She feared that if she continued to fail, someone else would find him first, and she would lose any chance of getting the information she sought. She steeled her resolve, convinced that she had to be the one to find him. Just then, a faint sound from outside her room caught her attention, and her ear twitched. The sound came from her door. She turned, clutching her nightgown nervously as she wondered who could possibly be visiting at such a late hour. As the door creaked open, her apprehension turned to surprise. Standing in the doorway was not a threat, but a small child. The boy, pushing a serving cart, offered a polite apology for disturbing her while she was resting. He introduced himself with a bright smile as Adele, the son of the Lord. He explained that he thought she might appreciate a brief conversation and had brought some tea, then politely asked if it was a bad time. Kate looked from the boy to the tea set, her tense expression softening slightly. She quietly accepted the offer. With a polite thank you, Adele began setting the tea service on a small table, his movements precise and formal. As he turned to leave, she stopped him, having wrapped a plaid shawl around her shoulders. Her tone grew sharp as she questioned why the son of the night commander would come to her room alone so late, asking if he was using his status to spy on her. He simply replied that the tea was ready. As she took a tentative sip, she thought to herself that it was best to remain on guard. She takes a sip of the tea, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. "It's delicious," she remarks. Adele, sitting opposite her, asks for confirmation, a pleasant smile on his face. He explains cheerfully that it's a special herbal tea prepared by his maids, noting that it has a relaxing effect. His innocent explanation causes her to blush with a bit of shame. She had been so tense, suspecting he was trying to probe for information. The thought of being so wary of a mere child now makes her feel foolish. She relaxes, admitting that the matter with Randolph has left her with little time for rest. She then thanks Adele for his kindness, clarifying that she's just a knight, not a noble, and asks him to forgive her earlier harshness. She continues, insisting he can simply call her Kate, without any formal titles. However, she then trails off, realizing that since it's just the two of them in the room, there's no one else to overhear their conversation. He agrees, suggesting it would be best if they both spoke in a way they find comfortable. With a slight smile, he addresses her simply as Kate. His directness makes her laugh, breaking the remaining tension. Adele joins in, sharing a light-hearted moment. As he brings the cup to his lips, his innocent demeanor vanishes, replaced by a sharp, calculating expression. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The tea and the pleasant conversation had served their purpose, to lower Kate's guard. His real strategy was to make her talk. With his trap set, he internally notes that the time has come to extract what he truly wants, information on Randolph and the Vanglash bandits. He looks at her and asks, "By the way, Kate, what kind of person is this Randolph you're all chasing?" While sipping from a cup, Kane calmly addresses the Knight Commander, Kate. He questions whether it is wise for someone of her stature to be fraternizing with him, suggesting that to a powerful warrior like her, he must seem like a simple child, easy to manage. His words provoke a sharp reaction. Kate slams her hand on the table, flustered, demanding to know who would say such a thing. She quickly dismisses the topic, insisting that the Bangrat Marquis has nothing to do with their current situation. Leaning forward, she changes the subject entirely, her tone becoming serious. She reveals a surprising connection. She and the bandit leader, Randolph, are actually childhood friends. As she speaks, a memory of them as children, training with wooden swords, comes to her mind. She recounts their shared dream, to grow up, join the Night Order together, and protect the people. Even the harshest training, she recalls, was enjoyable because they faced it together. Kane listens, his eyes wide with surprise. Her expression darkens with sorrow. She had always believed that as long as they were a team, they could overcome any evil. That belief was shattered when Randolph stole money from the Marquis and deserted the Night Order without a single word to her. Tears stream down her face as she forces a painful smile. To Randolph, she laments, their shared promise must have meant nothing at all. A memory surfaces of the Bangrat Marquis, a smug nobleman tossing coins. He was known for his greed, and Kate recalls that she and Randolph held no respect for a man who treated his soldiers like disposable pawns. It was because of this corruption, she explains, that she and Randolph had planned to reform the kingdom from within the royal guard. Kane listens intently as she recounts their noble intentions. Her sorrow transforms into fierce determination. Clenching her fist, she declares her resolve to find Randolph before anyone else does. She needs to confront him to understand why he did it, even if it means she must be the one to punish him afterward. Her face contorts with rage as she stares intently at Kane. She demands to know if the anger he displayed earlier was because Randolph had broken their promise. Kane remains silent, a passive observer to her emotional storm. He processes her story, acknowledging that while it was different from what he'd imagined, it has solidified their strategy. He thanks Knight Commander Kate for sharing something so personal, but she dismisses his attempt at an apology, stating it was her own fault for getting carried away. Later, in her quarters, Kate is approached by a concerned Melchia, who asks if she is all right. Now, in a simple chemise, Kate turns with a gentle smile, reassuring her that everything will be fine. Melchia looks down, a faint blush on her cheeks, and quietly bids her goodnight. As she leaves, she glances back with a soft expression, wondering if Kate's reassurance was meant to comfort her instead. The following day, Melchia, is agitated. She calls out for Adele, demanding to know why he isn't there when she has something important to discuss with him. From the courtyard below, Adele waves up to her cheerfully. He informs her that his subordinates have already departed to begin their search and tells her to calm down. His casual demeanor ignites her fury. She shouts down at him, questioning if he truly understood her story from the night before and declaring that she is completely serious about finding the man they seek. Moments later, inside, she confronts Adele directly. Her eyes widen in disbelief as she points at him, demanding to know why he is there. Trying to regain her composure, she orders him to bring her some tea. Before Adele can move, a large, rugged man carrying a serving tray steps forward. With a calm demeanor, he announces his name, Randall Baldus. Melchia points a trembling finger, her voice filled with disbelief. She demands to know why Randall Baldus is in the room. He stands before her, not in armor, but in a servant's vest, calmly holding a tea service. She presses him, asking what has become of his pride as a royal knight, and why a deserter is now performing such a menial task. He looks back at her, questioning what she means. Her shock turns to anger as she clenches her fist, insisting that this is no mere imitation of servitude. Adele watches the tense exchange unfold. Adele then steps forward, his voice steady and clear. He informs Melchia that the man before her is not the person she once knew. He is now simply a servant in the employ of Adele Rydrick. The soft clink of a teacup being set down underscores his declaration. His words only deepen Melchia's confusion. She turns to him, asking what he means and questioning if he is now allied with Randall. She redirects her questioning to Randall, asking if he is aware of the corruption within the nobility, specifically mentioning Kate. Randall states that it no longer concerns him. He immediately corrects himself, admitting that it is, in fact, related. He reveals that he deserted his post precisely because he was disgusted by the corruption of the Bangrat Marquis. Melchia gasps, stunned by the confession. His mind flashes back to a scene he witnessed many times. The smug Marquis Bangrat handing over a heavy pouch of bribe money. Randall had watched from the background, his disillusionment solidifying with each illicit exchange. He continues, explaining that he took that very bribe money and distributed it among the common folk in the streets. As he speaks, Melchia and Adele listen, their expressions shifting from shock to a dawning comprehension. Melchia can only murmur in disbelief. Adele's expression hardens with resolve. Internally, he confirms that everything up to this point has proceeded exactly according to his plan. The events were set in motion the previous night. After hearing Kate's story, Adele had found the opportunity he needed to persuade Randall and his men. He stood before Randall and his men, who questioned the wisdom of entering while a company of knights was present. Adele calmly assured them that the knights were likely resting in their rooms by now. Upon hearing this, Randall's expression shifted to one of surprise. He declared that he had just heard from Knight Commander Kate that she and Adele were childhood friends. His men reacted with disbelief, questioning if this was true. One of them mused that it made no sense for Kate to be pursuing Randall if she had such a connection to their new employer. As Melchia listened from an adjacent room, the men continued their discussion. One dismissed the idea as impossible, stating that Kate was far too serious a person to be swayed. Another, however, expressed hope that she might be persuaded to overlook their past deeds. Adele, overhearing them, interjected. He stated that after hearing Kate's side of the story, he didn't believe she would simply overlook Randall's actions, but he trailed off, leaving his thought unfinished. He then turned fully, a confident smile on his face, and declared that this was the very reason Randall needed to meet with her. The suggestion left the former knight utterly stunned. The logic was clear. Kate would undoubtedly continue her relentless and tenacious pursuit of Randall until he was found. Therefore, if she could be made to understand the situation, Randall challenged the boy's reasoning, asking if he was expected to live in fear of pursuit for the rest of his life. He reminded Adele that he had deserted the knights for a greater purpose, to create a place where people could live with dignity. In response, Adele extended a hand toward him, explaining that he wanted Randall to live with that same dignity, just like the people he sought to protect. The former knight considered this for a moment before a small smile formed, conceding the point. With newfound resolve, he agreed to the meeting. "Take me to her," he commanded. Adele looked up, a sense of satisfaction washing over him as his plan fell into place. He turned to Knight Commander Kate, who stood nearby. He instructed her to proceed with the matter they had discussed earlier. A confident smirk spread across Kate's face as she acknowledged the order, confirming she understood completely. Knight Commander Kate Rosenberg's mind raced, her face pale with shock. To think she had been complicit in such a thing, that she had let a criminal escape through bribery. As she reeled from the revelation, Randall Baldus and the young Lord Kane stood silently across the room, observing her reaction. She stood alone, processing the information. She acknowledged the shock but understood the gist of what had been conveyed. It would have been better, she thought, to have the two of them explain the misunderstanding directly. Her shock gave way to a grim understanding. She knew this situation should make her back down, but she questioned herself. Was it a knight's duty to flee in the face of such knowledge? With her resolve solidifying, she turned to face the two, her voice ringing with conviction. She demanded to know why they wouldn't raise their voices to correct this injustice, asking if the very purpose of knighthood wasn't to strive for the country's reform. Her questioning tone escalated into a fiery declaration. On the contrary, she felt her spirit ignite. She demanded to know why she should have to endure and not fight against such evil. In response to her outburst, Randolph turned away, remarking to Kane that Kate was too hard-headed and that her resolve was merely an ideal. He stated that the root of the problem would never change. A nearby maid added that, regardless, all who commit injustice must eventually be captured. He then turned back, his gaze sharp as he posed a difficult question. Did she realize that arresting the culprits would mean capturing half of the country's nobility? He insisted she must know it was an impossible task. Though shaken, Kate clenched her fist, stating that she was prepared to see it through with him. Despite her readiness, Randolph shifted his attention, placing a firm hand on Kane's shoulder. With unwavering conviction, he declared that he believed he could accomplish this monumental task, but only with this young lord by his side. His words, a declaration of a far grander scheme, echoed in the room, causing Kate's eyes to widen in disbelief. He intended to use the development of this territory as the first step toward changing the entire country ruled by corrupt nobles. Kane looks up at Randolph, a blush of surprise on his face. He can scarcely believe the man is placing so much trust in him. Reacting to this unexpected alliance, Kate Rosenberg's expression hardens. With a sharp metallic ring, she draws her sword, accusing Randolph of having forgotten his oath to her. The tip of her blade stops just shy of his throat. Randolph stares down its length, his gaze steady and unflinching. She presses her accusation, demanding to know if all he's done is switch his allegiance to another noble. Her words hang in the air, stunning Randolph into silence as Kane and Melchia watch in shock. Kane quickly steps forward, asking Kate what's wrong, but she shoves him aside. Her eyes burn with fury as she declares that harboring a known criminal is a grave offense. Vowing to arrest them both and deliver them to the capital for judgment, she brings her sword down, shattering a nearby table. The impact sends everyone stumbling backward amidst the splintered wood. Kate alone stands firm, her sword held ready. She states that if she had hesitated for even a moment, they would have been captured, justifying her sudden violence. As her blade swings again, Randolph catches it between his bare hands with a loud clang. He remarks that things have gotten rough, but that it can't be helped, his grip unshakable. He glances back to see Kane, giving him a confident thumbs up. The young lord tells him to go all out, declaring that he has his master's permission. Randolph looks on, momentarily speechless at the boy's unwavering support. His resolve solidified, Randolph turns back to Kate. He states that she doesn't seem to understand, and that if she has no intention of atoning for her sin, he will deliver her punishment. With a roar, he identifies himself as a royal knight and lunges forward to attack. Steel clashes against steel, showering the room in sparks. Randolph presses his assault with overwhelming force, his expression a mask of grim determination. Kate struggles to parry, her face a picture of shock as she questions what has happened. As the duel rages on, Melchia watches with growing panic, her hands clasped in worry. She frets aloud about what will happen, fearing that everyone will be arrested if the fight continues. The maid beside her offers a comforting word, but Adele, observing the battle with a keen eye, notes with concern that Randolph is being overpowered. Their collective worry is cut short by Kane's voice. He looks towards them, a picture of calm confidence, and declares with an unshakable smile, Randolph will win. He's sure of it. His absolute certainty washes over Melchia, who looks on with a relieved and touched expression, whispering his name. Adele beams beside her, echoing the sentiment. That's right, she says, we have to believe. In a fierce clash of steel, the bandit leader Randolph Baldus parries a strike from Knight Commander Kate Rosenberg. He mocks her, questioning how she could not understand the vast difference in their power, and sarcastically notes that her master must have been quite something. Elsewhere in the fray, another bandit strains against Kate's assault, recognizing her as a knight and feeling his own limits being pushed. The memory of the battle gives way to its aftermath. Tears stream down Kate's face as she looks up at Randolph, pleading with him not to abandon her and try to become a noble all by himself. He stares down at her, his expression hard and unyielding. His response is not with words, but with sudden violence. He lunges forward, grabbing the front of her blouse and hoisting her up, his face contorted in a furious shout. Despite his grip, she finds her voice, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of her sword as she screams that he is wrong. Her defiance is instantly crushed. With a flick of his power, her sword is ripped from its sheath and sent flying, embedding itself deep into the ground a short distance away. Kate can only stare in stunned silence. The narrative shifts to a conversation before this confrontation. Randolph, his back turned to Kate, explains his past decision. He states that before his departure, he realized he could never truly improve the country if he had to keep witnessing the corruption of the nobles while remaining a knight himself. She continues his line of reasoning as she walks away, affirming that this is why he left the knightly order, to create a place where the common people could live happily, free from the injustice of the aristocracy. He turns to face her, his voice softening slightly as he reminds her of their shared past. He recalls how they once swore an oath together to become knights in order to protect the country and its people. Clutching his chest with conviction, He declares that he is here now to fulfill that very vow. He believes a world built on that ideal can be created, and that the boy, Adele, is the key. Though the path he walks is different, he insists his ultimate goal remains the same. Her eyes well up with tears as she whispers his name. She thinks to herself that she never forgot their promise. With a final, sorrowful glance, Kate turns her back on him and walks away into the corridor. The Knight Commander walked away, tears streaming down her face, yet a faint, bittersweet smile touched her lips. It was her loss, she admitted to herself. Meanwhile, back in the room, a young attendant with neatly tied hair clasped her hands in excitement, exclaiming how truly amazing the recent events had been. She turned to Randolph, praising Adele's prowess. She gushed that even though he would have been captured if he lost, he trusted Randolph to the very end. Randolph, however, seemed less than pleased, grumbling that it was he who had fought. Nearby, Melchia spoke with Adele, her cheeks flushed. She confessed that she had been worried about what might happen, but was glad things had worked out. She remarked that it was quite a surprise to see Adele make such a mistake, and he acknowledged that his strategy had turned out a bit different than planned. He then turned his attention to Sharana, clasping his hands together. Explaining that he had to take care of something today, he pleaded with her to perform a status appraisal on 2 people. Sharana agreed, but not without a price, 30 cookies. She added that it would have been better if he'd just asked her to appraise Kate and Randolph from start. The results of the appraisal revealed a stark contrast in their mental states. Kate's status showed penalties for distrust and wavering, while Randolph showed bonuses for motivation and loyalty. Looking over the data, Adele fell into deep thought. He realized that without this status abnormality, the outcome might have been different. He concluded that their feelings and the environment had a strong influence on their abilities, a factor that never existed in the game. His contemplation was interrupted as he spotted Kate slipping out of the room through a large doorway. He called out her name. She didn't seem to hear him, continuing down the long, pillared hallway. Adele watched her go, a look of concern on his face as he questioned her departure. Just as she was about to disappear from view, she stopped. Turning back, she met his gaze from across the hall and softly spoke his name, just as he murmured hers. He approaches her with a cheerful smile, asking if she's okay. Kate, however, looks away, her expression troubled. She thinks to herself that she doesn't know what to say, that she can't say anything at all. Her internal conflict gives way to directness. She turns to face him, asking, Adele, how much have you figured out? His smile fades, replaced by a steady, serious expression. He reveals that he knew from the start that she had come to talk to him. The revelation startles Kate, who seems to recall a past conversation. With a complex expression, she observes that everything seems to be going well for him. The unexpected statement throws Adele into confusion. His eyes widen as he stares at her, demanding to know, what in the world are you? Reflecting on his conversation with Kate Rosenberg and her attendant the previous night, Adele feels a sense of satisfaction, believing that events are unfolding just as he had anticipated. His confidence is abruptly shattered when Kate whirls around to face him, her expression intense as she demands to know who he truly is. He is taken completely by surprise, stammering in confusion. Kate remains silent, her gaze unwavering as she quietly asks what he is talking about. His mind races with panic. He realizes that Kate, a crucial character from the original story, is suspicious of him. The situation is dire. He cannot let her suspect he is a reincarnated person. Desperate for a diversion, he points suddenly towards the hallway, shouting with faint alarm, asking what has happened over there. His shout successfully draws attention. Down the hall, the head butler, Baron, and Kate's attendant look over, startled by the sudden commotion. The head butler immediately hurries towards them, calling out to Adele and asking what is wrong. He gestures dramatically toward a nearby reception room, which is in complete disarray. Baron explains that he had forgotten about the incident, pointing out that the sofa has been split in 2 and the room looks as if it was ravaged by something. Adele, sweating nervously, seizes the opportunity to deflect. He quickly suggests that perhaps some deserters have infiltrated the territory and are hiding within the mansion. His suggestion is met with a firm grip as Kate seizes his head. She angrily explains that the reception room was meticulously crafted and passed down through generations. She declares that she will not forgive the deserters for desecrating it. She stands flustered before Melchia and her father, stammering as she tries to find the words to explain the chaos. Melchia's father observes the scene with concern, noting that she is being treated with great importance. In a sudden display of contrition, she bows deeply before the head butler, Baron. Adele watches from the side as she loudly proclaims her apology to the head of the household staff. Still bent over, she confesses that she was the one who wrecked the room. She explains that there was a misunderstanding which caused her to draw her sword, clarifying that the deserters she had mentioned were not involved. Melchia's father looks on, stunned by the admission. As she takes full responsibility, Adele steps forward with a look of grim determination, vowing that he will compensate for the damages in any way necessary. He then addresses Baron directly, offering a sincere apology. Adele insists that what happened was his fault and pleads with him not to make a big deal out of it. Kate looks at the boy, her eyes wide with alarm, and tells him to stop, reiterating that the responsibility is hers. Baron observes their exchange, stroking his chin thoughtfully. After a moment, Baron announces his decision. He will not report the incident to the master of the house, but on one condition. In exchange, Adele will work for them as a servant while he is staying there. His unexpected proposal is met with stunned silence. Both Adele and Kate are rendered speechless, their expressions a mask of pure shock. Melshia's father, overhearing the arrangement, becomes incensed. He confronts Baron, demanding to know what he is thinking. He argues that since Adele is a guest of the State Knights, they cannot simply take money from him, and any disciplinary action is their responsibility. Before the argument can continue, Kate speaks up. She declares that they will settle the matter through labor. If that is the offer, she states with gratitude, then she accepts. With the matter settled, Baron wasted no time. He turned to Adele and instructed him to prepare Melshia for a change of clothes. Adele, taken aback, stammered in protest, but the head butler simply smiled, clarifying that this was not a suggestion. The implication of his new role sent a blush across Adele's face as he stood near Melshia. Baron, observing from the side, was pleased. This was the perfect way to create a connection. He mused that being on such familiar terms with the Knight Commander was an excellent chance to raise her affection. The realization struck Adele with the force of a physical blow. Baron was treating him as a candidate for Kate's hand. Before he could process this horrifying thought, a nearby door swung open. A voice called out, announcing that they had been waiting for Adele. As Baron noted that things were proceeding smoothly, Adele's mind raced in panic. This was all wrong. Getting involved with the main heroine was a terrible idea. He could only imagine the original protagonist's wrath. In a grand room, Kane is taken aback by the sight of a young woman dressed in a revealing, frilly maid's uniform, her face flushed with embarrassment. Nearby, Melshia observes with a knowing smile, remarking that she suspected such cute clothes had been prepared. Kane, however, is simply stunned by the display. She trembles slightly, stealing her resolve. She tells herself she must accept this as part of her atonement, though she quietly mutters that it must be a result of Kane's peculiar tastes. Her reluctant acceptance is met with unexpected excitement from Melshia, who eagerly asks if she can wear one too. She declares that she and another young girl will change together, but the girl has already dashed off to do so, leaving Melshia momentarily surprised by her swiftness. Moments later, the girl reappears, now clad in a unique bear-themed maid outfit. She poses cheerfully, calling for Adele to look at the cute frills. Beside her, Adele stands stiffly in a similar uniform, her face burning with a deep blush as Kane and Baron look on. She is utterly mortified, covering her face as she questions why a woman of her age is wearing such a thing. The embarrassment of her son, seeing her like this, is too much, and she slumps forward in shame. He quickly reassures her that it's all right, telling her she looks cute and that the outfit suits her. His words seem to comfort her. From the side, Baron observes that Melshia has been completely won over, before muttering for them to stop. His quiet plea is ignored as the barriered girl playfully calls Adele bold for wearing the same kind of outfit. With a snap of her fingers, a flash of light envelopes Melshia, who suddenly finds herself dressed in a maid uniform as well, her expression one of utter shock. He grins, revealing that he used illusion magic to change her appearance. He then asks if she will join them in wearing the outfits, proposing that in exchange, he will entrust her with handling Kate's situation. In response, Melshia formally accepts the arrangement. She states that she will obey any command from her master and will do her utmost to be of service. The other young maid beside her expresses her gratitude. As the new arrangement settles, Randall watches with a serious, unreadable expression. Kane stands beside him, remarking that while he was a bit worried, he feels confident that leaving things to Melshia will be fine. He agrees to the terms, then turns his attention to Randall, asking what he wants. As he walks away down the long hall, he muses that asking the man to do a job is probably as simple as asking him to clean. He continues on, a sense of unease growing within him, feeling there is something else he should be concerned about. Bursting through a doorway, he stops dead in his tracks. The room before him is in complete chaos. Books are strewn across the floor, papers are scattered, and furniture is overturned. "What is this?" he cries out in shock. The boy's shock turns to horror as he realizes the extent of the disaster. His study is an absolute wreck. A cry of his name, Adele-sama, echoes from within the room. He finds Melshia on the floor amidst the mess, weeping and apologizing profusely. She explains that she was present, but couldn't prevent it. He rushes to her side, asking what happened. Melshia recounts the events, explaining that Kate had been asked to clean the study. A series of mishaps followed. Kate lost her balance reaching for a book, tumbled into a stack of documents, and sent a chair flying. By the time Melshia realized what was happening, the room was already destroyed. Adele can only stare, thinking to himself that Kate is far too clumsy. Meanwhile, Randall stands outside a room with a grim expression, muttering that it has come to this. He is interrupted by a voice calling his name, demanding to know what is going on. Inside the room, Randall explains the situation. He states that while Kate is the finest sword arm in the kingdom, she is completely useless at everything else. He reveals that he has been cleaning her room for years, a testament to her long-standing ineptitude with chores. Back in the ruined study, Adele sits at his desk, surrounded by mountains of books. He reflects on his knowledge from a game, where Kate was portrayed as a reliable older sister figure. He now realizes she is, in fact, incredibly clumsy and wonders if it's all an act to get his attention. Suddenly, a hand rests on his head. It's Kate, now in her maid uniform, leaning over him with a concerned, winking expression. Adele, are you okay? She asks. He looks up, startled, and can only utter her name in response. She frantically apologizes to Adele, promising to clean up the mess at once. But Adele, seeing that the disaster has spread from the reception room to his study, tries to stop her. He insists it's truly fine, that her good intentions are more than enough. Kate vehemently disagrees, waving her hands and telling him not to worry about cleaning because it's an impossible task for him. A dreadful thought crosses Adele's mind. If he lets her continue cleaning, the entire mansion might collapse. In the hallway, Kane becomes alarmed as he sees a maid about to change the water in a vase of roses, a precious gift from his mother. Fearing it will be broken, he resolves to handle it himself. Nearby, the head butler, Baron, wipes a tear from his eye, lamenting that it is already too late. He reaches for the vase, but another maid intercepts him, grabbing it firmly. She insists that he shouldn't worry, and that it is her role to take care of it. Kane struggles against her, trying to pull the vase away, confused by her forceful refusal. Their struggle proves disastrous. The glass vase slips from their hands and shatters violently on the floor, sending water and roses flying. Kane and the maids can only watch in shock. After the incident, Kane turns to a startled Melchia. He apologizes for the mess and asks her to prepare a bath for him, adding that Randall will take care of the rest. Later, while soaking in a large bath, he lets out a sigh of relief. He reflects that he was able to protect the vase and is glad that it ended with only him getting splashed with water. In the same bath, Kate Rosenberg reflects on her own actions. She feels she may have been too cold in her response to Kane earlier, having left him to deal with the situation alone. She dismisses the thought, deciding not to worry about it. Her contemplation is broken by Kane's voice. He observes that she worries about others, even when she herself has been harmed. Startled, Kate stands up abruptly in the water. Kane, equally shocked to see her, shouts her name and demands to know why she is in the same bath. The scene shifts to 30 minutes prior, inside a study. Randall Baldus stands with his arms crossed, surveying a room in complete disarray, with books strewn across the floor. He remarks to Baron and the maid that he suspected something was wrong, but never imagined it would be this severe. He admitted to Kate that, unlike her, he was clumsy and useless at anything besides wielding a sword. His hand clenched into a fist as he spoke. Resigned, he turned to the maid and announced he would handle the cleanup himself. He then gave the maid a new instruction, to go and wash the young master's back, and to be sure to apologize properly. The maid, her expression brightening, acknowledged him by name. Her initial relief quickly turned to flustered panic. The realization dawned on her that she was being told to bathe with him. She internally wrestled with the thought, questioning if she was truly embarrassed by a child, yet unable to shake the feeling of seeing him as a male, a notion she desperately tried to dismiss. Meanwhile, in the bath, the situation had already progressed differently. Kate, with a serious expression, told a startled Kane that as her atonement, she wanted him to wash her back. He reacted with immediate shock, covering his face in his hands as he wondered if this was truly in Kate's character. She tried to reassure him, saying there was no need to atone and that he shouldn't worry about the room or the vase. Despite her words, a deep blush spread across her face as she looked away, clarifying that her request was only about the incident from before. She then elaborated on her predicament, explaining to Kane that her relationship with Randall was now irreparable. She confessed that they might have fought to the death had things escalated, and that she felt like a failure as a knight commander for needing to be escorted back to the capital. The memory of the shattered vase flashed through her mind. She concluded that this was all part of her atonement with Randall, and that was why she had resorted to such a shameless act. Kane, however, offered a bright, reassuring smile. He dismissed her self-doubt, telling her that wasn't true at all and that she had been able to perform her duties as a knight perfectly well even without him. His simple, earnest words struck a chord, and her eyes welled with tears. Overwhelmed with emotion, she quietly asked if he was truly saying that everything would be okay. Still emotional, she kneels in the water and offers her gratitude, calling him Adele. Her sincerity catches Kane off guard, though he regards her with a gentle, knowing smile. His quiet moment is shattered as Kate suddenly lunges forward, wrapping her arms around him in a tight, desperate embrace. The unexpected physical contact sends a jolt through Kane, leaving him utterly flustered and stammering. In the warmth of the bath, Kate Rosenberg clings to Adele, tears of relief streaming down her face. She confesses that she had wanted to be the one to punish Randall herself. With a trembling voice, she thanks Adele for killing him for her. Adele, taken aback by her raw emotion, can only manage to say her name. She holds him tighter, a serene expression on her face as she murmurs that she is glad it was him who did it. Their feet rest close together at the edge of the tub, the water still. As the embrace continues, Adele's face flushes with embarrassment. He internally wonders just how long they're going to remain in this position. Later, as they're getting out, he reflects that he cannot simply leave her side, not after the intimacy of their shared bath. He calls out her name, Kate. Suddenly, Kate loses her balance on the wet floor. She cries out an apology to Adele, saying she'll move away, but she slips and tumbles backward, pulling him down with her. Adele shouts her name in alarm as they both fall. She lands with a thud, wincing from the impact. Pushing herself up slightly, she touches her head, momentarily dazed. From his position pinned beneath her, Adele stammers, his face burning with embarrassment at the compromising situation. Her focus shifts as she looks down, her eyes swirling with disorientation from the fall. She asks with genuine concern, "Are you okay?" The following day, Kate, now clad in her full armor, stands before Adele outside the estate. With a slight blush, she mentions that she spoke with him about various things during his stay. Adele, flanked by the two maids, listens as she prepares to depart. She stood before the gate in her full armor, explaining that since Randall was not found within the territory, she would report it as such. She told Adele to rest easy and offered him her thanks. Turning to face him, her cheeks flushed, she clasped her hands and pleaded with him to keep the events of the previous night a secret. Adele, caught off guard, blushed in response. She continued, promising that as the Knight Commander, she would protect his honor and tell no one. Though she didn't know who he truly was, she was certain he was not a bad person, and that was enough for her. With a final, brilliant smile, she formally entrusted the matter of Randall to him. Sometime after her departure, Adele walked alongside Randall Baldus, who remarked that Kate had finally left and that dealing with her had been a nuisance. He then commented with a smirk that he never expected Randall's little sister to be so cute. Adele simply replied that it didn't matter, prompting Randall to ask what he meant. The man turned, crossing his arms with an amused expression. He declared that he hadn't realized Adele had a preference for older women, much to the boy's complete shock. Adele's composure shattered as he frantically denied the accusation, insisting Randall listen to him. The bandit leader only laughed, teasing that spring had finally come for the Knight Commander. With the matter concerning the Knight Commander settled, Randall Baldus and his band of former thieves were officially integrated as mercenaries under Kane's command. The new arrangement left one of the household maids visibly flustered. In exchange for room and board, Randall began putting his practical combat experience to use, taking on the additional task of training the domain soldiers. He later reported to Kane that this development had improved their military strength far more than anticipated, calling it a welcome miscalculation. However, this success came with a significant downside. Kane clutched his head in anguish, struck by a harsh and immediate reality. He had no money. The cost of hiring Randall and his 50 men, on top of the recent repairs to the mansion, had created an overwhelming and sudden drain on his finances. With his funds depleted, he resolved that his next priority must be to implement new economic measures. To that end, he traveled with Sharana and Adele to the central town of the Landhill domain. The bustling marketplace, teeming with people and stalls, left him momentarily in awe. He had heard rumors of its prosperity, but seeing it firsthand revealed a level of activity and vibrancy that was a world apart from the Riedrich domain. A local merchant explained that Landhill's status as a merchant town drew people from many different nations to trade their wares, making the magic tools Kane possessed quite valuable. Nearby, Sharana expressed her irritation, questioning why he was so willing to part with her precious creations. Kane, however, smiled confidently. He explained his plan. Since there were no merchants specializing in magic tools in their own territory, Landhill, with its numerous specialty shops, was the perfect place to sell them and secure the funds they desperately needed. The prospect of showing off her creations invigorated Sharana, who eagerly anticipated the astonished reactions of the local merchants. Adele, however, interjected with a sharp question, asking if these items were simply antiques recovered from a dungeon. The inquiry caught Sharana completely off guard. She watched as Kane confidently dismissed the concerns. He declared that any who couldn't see the value of the items would understand soon enough, boasting that he would earn a great deal of money for his master. His confidence was short-lived, as Adele suddenly interjected with a sharp question. She asked if it was truly all right that he hadn't informed the Lord of Landhill of their arrival beforehand. He froze, a nervous sweat breaking out on his brow. Adele pressed on, wondering aloud if he truly intended to go without a proper reception from the local authorities. He quickly recovered, laughing off the concern. Kane explained that their sole purpose today was to sell magic tools. Adele, impressed, concluded that he must have been considerate of the Lord's time, realizing that in a busy territory like Landhill, there was no need to cause a fuss. Internally, however, he was panicking. Clutching his chest, he realized how close he'd come to being exposed, having simply forgotten to follow proper protocol. Sharana then offered the true reason for avoiding the Lord. She explained that she had no desire to meet him because his only daughter, Lady Emarina, was a destruction flag candidate, a villainess. According to Sharana, the Lord spoiled his daughter rotten, resulting in a terrible personality who treated commoners like garbage. Her words conjured a grim image in Kane's mind. A desperate lord leading his forces, potentially having to expend vast resources and manpower to clean up a disaster caused by his daughter. Back on the street, Sharana waved a dismissive hand, stating she and the lord's daughter wouldn't get along anyway. She urged them to finish their business quickly before being discovered and pointed them toward the main street to begin their search. Their first stop, however, proved fruitless. A bespectacled shopkeeper examined one of their items and flatly stated, "We can't buy this," leaving Sharana momentarily stunned. At another establishment, the result was the same. A polite manager apologized, explaining that her shop simply couldn't handle such an item, while her staff in the background fretted that it was impossible to even assign it a price. Inside yet another shop, the reception is just as dismissive. A merchant waves them off, telling them to bring something more decent next time. The shop's appraiser, holding one of Shiana's intricate necklaces, peers at it through his spectacles and scoffs, asking what kind of toy it is. Standing outside, Kane's shoulders slump in defeat. He confirms that this place was also a bust. He begins to wonder aloud if it's truly impossible for a regular shop on the main street to purchase any of their items, a heavy silence hanging over the group. Her patience finally shatters. Shirana erupts, declaring that it's impossible for her magic tools to be worthless. She lunges back towards the shop, shouting for them to appraise her items immediately. Adele and Kane quickly grab hold of her, struggling to restrain the furious, which as Kane calls out her name in alarm. Inside the shop, Shirana kneels before Adele, striking a provocative pose in her witch's attire. She chides him for being so serious, asking if he's really refusing to buy her outfit. With a teasing smile, she points out that he's staring at her legs like a child. Her display elicits shocked expressions from the elven Adele and another attendant. Shirana simply turns her head with a curious as the young Adele, completely flustered, shouts an apology and declares he'll leave at once. He grabs Shirana and pulls her away, demanding to know what she thinks she's doing. She protests, explaining that it was just a bit of seduction to ensure she wasn't underestimated. Her bravado crumbles instantly as tears well up in her eyes. She laments that after all her effort, no one will buy her magic tools, questioning if they're nothing but junk. As the elven Adele mutters in disbelief, Shirana tearfully reminds her that the young Adele had praised them. Dejected, she turns and walks away, leaving both Adels watching her departure with expressions of concern and bewilderment. The elven Adele approaches the now undressed Shirana, who holds her discarded outfit. She apologizes for calling the items junk, admitting her ignorance about magic tools, and asks about the effect of a particular bracelet. Shirana explains that when she wears it, all her other equipment is stripped away. Upon seeing the effect, the young Adele exclaims that it's an incredible item. Shirana, now surrounded by a pleasant aura, enthusiastically agrees. His excitement quickly sours into annoyance. He thinks to himself that if Adele understood the item's greatness, he should have said so before she put it on. He wonders if the activation condition is to equip it without appraising it first, making its true value difficult to ascertain. He reflects on the situation, realizing he never expected to have to buy all of her magic tools himself. His original plan was to use the sale to connect with a good merchant and help revitalize the local economy. But now he's stuck with items of unknown worth. His thoughts trigger a memory from his past life. In the original story, the town of Landhill was the primary location for shopping and party management. More importantly, it was the place where a key character from the hero's party was destined to appear. He found it strange that for a town with no notable features in the game's settings, there were an unusual number of merchants. As he pondered this, Shirana called out to him, pointing out that someone else had also set up a shop nearby. Looking down the alley, he was surprised to see a lively street market. He mused that while the stalls were mostly small-scale, there was always a chance of finding a rare item among them. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden commotion. A young noblewoman stood with her hand raised, shouting for someone to stop. Adele, taken aback, wondered what was happening. The noblewoman turned, her expression filled with disdain. She demanded to know who dared to speak to her in such a way and questioned if they understood who she was, before proudly declaring herself to be Emily Landhill, the daughter of the local lord. Adele saw that her anger was directed at a young, poorly dressed girl sitting on the ground with her wares. Realizing he had stepped into a tense situation involving nobility, he quickly apologized for intruding. Emily ignored him, continuing to berate the terrified merchant. She demanded to know by whose permission the girl was operating her stall there. Her voice rose with indignation as she declared that setting up a shop in that alley was against the law. The young merchant flinched, too frightened to speak. She then sneered, calling the girl's items garbage and questioning who would sell such things on the street. Emily revealed her true colors, stating that she was the one who was supposed to be selling there and that the girl was nothing but a nuisance. She condescendingly asked if the girl could even understand human language. Leaning closer with a cruel, predatory smile, Emily called the girl trash. She ordered her to pack up her garbage and leave immediately if she understood. Observing the scene from a distance, Shirana remarks on the unpleasant feeling in the air. Adele, arms crossed, notes that such a stark difference between territories is a direct reflection of their rulers. Kane watches, his face shadowed with disgust. He reflects on the situation, realizing that while the villainous Emiliana from the game had a terrible personality, this reality is far worse. He concludes that she was a small-time, bona fide scoundrel from the very beginning. His attention is fixed on the confrontation between the noblewoman, Emily Landhill, and a poor girl kneeling on the street. He wonders why he's witnessing such a scene, questioning why no one is stopping her. A flicker of recognition makes him think he may have met Emily at a social function before. As he watches, the girl begs Emily to let her sell her meager belongings, explaining that she has nothing else to eat. Emily dismisses her plea with a cold, "I don't know anything about that." Nearby, Kane's hand clenches into a tight fist, his knuckles white with suppressed rage. Her plea met only with cruelty. The girl's face crumples in despair. Emily sneers, telling her that people like her make the town stink and that she should just die. The words strike the girl, leaving her utterly devastated. Kane remains silent, his expression grim. The surrounding townspeople avert their eyes, whispering amongst themselves that the poor girl must have caught the noble's attention. One parent quietly tells their child not to stare, a clear sign of the fear that grips the populace. His companion, Adele, breaks the silence, asking if he's truly okay with just leaving things as they are. Sharana adds that even she is starting to feel disgusted. Adele, however, offers a pragmatic warning. Interfering will undoubtedly earn the wrath of Emily. The source of that unchecked power is made clear in a brief glimpse of the Landhill Lord doting on his daughter. He declares that no matter what anyone says, this territory belongs to Emily, and he cannot fathom what she might do to those who displease her. This reality leaves Kane in a terrible bind. He knows that simply triggering a destruction flag for Emily isn't enough. His military isn't prepared, and crossing a dangerous, unrepaired bridge is out of the question. Intervening now would expose his own people to danger. He feels he has no choice. While he wrestles with his powerlessness, Emily's smile widens with malicious intent. She looks down at the crying girl and offers, "If you can't do it yourself, then I'll help you." The girl looks up, her expression a mixture of confusion and terror. She looks down with contempt at the young girl and her meager belongings, sneering as she asks aloud how she should dispose of this trash. Her cruel words hang in the air. With a wide, malicious grin, she declares that she will handle the disposal herself. The terrified girl can only plead for her to stop, a cry that reaches Kane, who watches in silent horror. Ignoring the plea, she raises her foot, poised to stomp on the few coins the girl has managed to collect. The girl begs her by name, Lady Emily, to stop. Just as her heel is about to descend, a voice cuts through the tension, declaring that she has gone too far. Emily turns, her expression shifting to annoyance as she spots the source of the interruption. He steps forward calmly, a polite smile on his face as he apologizes for his rudeness. Emily recognizes him, her surprise evident. He continues his explanation, stating that he had heard she was visiting his territory and came to offer a greeting. He claims he saw her selling what he assumed were her family's prized magic tools and didn't wish to interrupt her business. Her expression shifts to one of condescending recognition. She identifies him as Adel Bashan from the impoverished Leadrider noble family, remarking on how much he has changed. She then asks if he is also in such dire straits that he must sell his family's tools. With a sharp gesture, 2 armored guards move to flank her. She smirks, stating that for him to interfere with her affairs means he must be prepared for the consequences. She leans in closer, her voice a low challenge. Addressing him again as Adel Bashan, she demands he provide a reason for his actions that she will find satisfactory. Inside the shop, the noblewoman, Emily Landhill, looks down at Kane with a condescending smile. She addresses him as Adel Chan and asks if he will provide a convincing reason for his presence. Kane remains silent, realizing he had entered impulsively without any excuse prepared. He is momentarily startled, his mind racing. His thoughts flash back to the timid girl sitting on the street, her few wares displayed before her. He understands that this is a time-sensitive matter, and a realization dawns as he looks toward the girl. With newfound purpose, he turns back to Emily and her guards. He offers an apology to Emelina-sama, stating that his business there was concluded and he was just leaving. Then, with a confident smile, he declares that the timid girl is, in fact, the very merchant he had been searching for. The girl is utterly shocked by his words, questioning if he could possibly mean her a trashy girl. Emily, equally perplexed, repeats his phrase, unable to comprehend why he would be seeking out such a person. Emily addresses Kane directly, acknowledging that he came to sell tools but stating it would be a problem for her if he were to close his shop. She points out that there are plenty of excellent merchants on the main street for him to deal with. Hearing this, the timid girl's face falls. She thinks to herself that her stall is unsightly and she has no funds. It feels useless to even try. Kane leans in conspiratorially towards Emily, placing a finger to his lips. He whispers that she may not have noticed her true qualities, but the girl is an excellent merchant. In fact, the very best in the entire town. Emily reacts with disbelief. His bold declaration stuns the timid girl, who looks up with wide eyes. Emily's expression hardens into anger, while Mina and her elven companion watch the escalating situation with surprise. Mina questions the claim, but Kane confidently explains that the girl will be able to properly appraise the items he has brought. He asserts that she is different from the merchants on the main street, who lack a discerning eye. Emily seethes, impressed yet furious that Kane deduced so much in such a short time. Deciding she has heard enough, she points forcefully at him. If he is so certain, she demands, then he must show her these items at once. She peers into the bag Kane holds open, her eyes widening in disbelief at the contents. It is a collection of strange artifacts and trinkets, which she immediately dismisses in her mind as nothing more than junk. Her disbelief turns to scornful laughter. She mocks the idea that such items could be anything but worthless, finding it pathetic that the girl would even have a shop. Behind her, the timid girl flinches at the harsh words, while Kane watches impassively. Picking a peculiar, dark, orb-like device from the bag, she holds it up for all to see. As a landhill, she boasts of her own appraisal skills and declares with absolute certainty that the object is simply garbage. Before she can cast it aside, Kane interrupts, asking for a moment. At the same time, the timid girl's head snaps up. Her gaze locks onto the device, her eye widening as a complex, star-like pattern reflects in her pupil. The object now rests in the girl's hands. She cradles it with reverence, her expression one of pure astonishment. She whispers that it's incredible, marveling that such a thing could even exist. She turns to Kane, her voice trembling with excitement as she confirms she understands the value of the magical tool. However, she trails off, overwhelmed by the thought that she could never afford to purchase such a magnificent item herself. In the background, Emily watches, perplexed by their hushed exchange. A slow, dark smile spreads across Emily's face. Her initial confusion gives way to a sharp understanding. "Ah, I see," she murmurs to herself, "so that's how it is." Clutching the orb, the girl looks up with newfound determination. She explains to Kane that while she doesn't have her own shop, she is still a merchant. And as a merchant, she cannot lie about the results of an appraisal. The noblewoman, Emily Landhill, addresses the timid girl, offering her a single month to earn a profit. She hands the girl a small bowl, suggesting she sell the magical tool she holds to get started, referring to it dismissively as junk. Observing from a short distance, Adele recalls his own appraisal of the item, a mere few silver coins. He silently questions if the girl could possibly sell it for more than that. Emily leans in closer, her voice dripping with condescension. She tells the girl that she must prove her worth through her actions, demanding she grovel for the opportunity being presented. At that moment, Adele steps forward, asking if she is truly serious. Emily turns to him with a confident smile, assuring him there is no problem and suggesting they formalize the agreement with a contract later. She then lays out her cruel terms. If the girl fails to generate a profit, she will be exiled from the country. As for Adele, who has been an obstacle, he will become Emily's personal slave. A smug expression crosses her face as she savors the thought, musing aloud how delightful it would be to treat him as a slave for the rest of her life. Adele lowers his head, his expression unreadable. His elf attendant cries out that the price is far too steep, but Adele accepts the terms. Emily confirms their promise is sealed. With the deal struck, she turns away, remarking that they are now fellow paupers who must cooperate to earn money. She states that she looks forward to seeing the results in 1 month's time. After she departs, Adele and his companion stand in the street, a heavy silence hanging between them. The quiet is shattered by his attendant, who demands to know why Adele would agree to such a contract. Mina chimes in, pointing out that the magic tool isn't worth nearly enough to justify the risk. Adele opens his mouth to respond, beginning to explain himself. He watches as the young girl prostrates herself on the stone floor, her voice trembling as she apologizes profusely. She feels deeply responsible for having involved him in such a strange and perilous situation after he had only tried to help her. He tells her not to worry, explaining that he was the one who chose to interject. The girl looks up, her face flushed with surprise and emotion, admitting that it is the first time anyone has ever praised her in such a manner. Her shock melts into a radiant, tearful smile as she offers him her heartfelt thanks. Their moment is interrupted by the mocking voice of Emily Landhill, who lounges nearby. She asks Adele if he makes a habit of interfering with the merchants she occasionally singles out for her amusement. As she speaks, the elf attendant quietly provides context to Adele and Mina. He explains that many merchants have been leaving the territory recently, and clarifies that Emily herself is not a genuine merchant. Walking through the city streets, they witness the economic hardship firsthand as a merchant struggles with his wares. Mina explains that the local lord's own store is nearby, and its success, along with many other new establishments, is crushing the smaller businesses. An older shopkeeper elaborates on the grim reality. He states that no respectable merchant can endure Emily's constant harassment. Furthermore, since the prices on her magic tools are fixed, smaller merchants who can't afford to stock them are driven out of business. Mina realizes Emily is deliberately targeting the citizens of her own domain. As the young girl gazes at one of the magic tools, Mina connects the dots for Adele. She explains that the merchants who were forced to leave had to sell their shops, which Emily then purchased. Mina finds it suspicious that a noble's daughter would be so deeply involved in business, suggesting there's more to it than simple profit. She turns to the girl, asking to see the magic tool again, suspecting a special kind of obstruction magic is at work. Mina explains to Adele that the tool is enchanted to be unrecognizable as magical to anyone without a sufficiently high skill level. This, she concludes, is why the girl couldn't get a proper appraisal, and why others were unable to succeed. Mina beams with pride, remarking on the impressive quality of the magic tool and praising her apprentice's work. Kane stands silently beside her, observing the scene. Nearby, the young elf attendant tells the timid girl that she was only praised because of the magic tool, not her own merit. As other merchants discuss the shop's modest profits, the girl's thoughts drift to her own appraisal skill, an ability she's possessed since childhood that far surpasses those around her. She clutches the small item, feeling overwhelmed and incapable of handling something so valuable. Kane, however, approaches her, pleased with the potential profit. He tells her to wait, assuring her that he's glad he entrusted the item to her because she can truly understand its worth. He urges her to have more confidence in her own abilities. His words cause her to spiral inward. She thinks that she's only good at appraising and doesn't even have her own shop. Such a magnificent magic tool, she feels, is far too much for someone like her to sell. Her anxiety deepens into fear, tears welling in her eyes. She wonders if she should go and apologize to Emily Landhill immediately. She's certain she'll be punished for her presumption. Overwhelmed, she covers her mouth and whispers an apology to herself. Kane, Mina and the elf attendant watch her, their expressions a mixture of silence and concern. In response to her despair, Kane steps forward abruptly, startling his companions. He gently cups the girl's face, telling her to look up and stand tall. He asks what kind of merchant tries to sell things with absolutely no confidence. He continues to hold her gaze, insisting that she needs to have more self-assurance. He reassures her that she possesses a great talent, but until now, she simply lacked the opportunity to let it flourish. His encouragement breaks through her doubt. With tears of gratitude streaming down her blushing cheeks, she looks up at him as he calls her a wonderful merchant. She bows her head slightly and manages a quiet, heartfelt thank you. Her gratitude quickly transforms into resolve. Looking at Kane with newfound determination, she tells him to leave everything to her, promising to exceed his expectations. She declares her intent to show Emily Landhill her true skill as a merchant. Kane smiles, accepting her vow. Satisfied, she instructs him to sign if he has no objections. As his quill moves across the parchment, Kane inwardly notes with some admiration that she remembered the terms correctly, though a hint of a larger plan lingers in his thoughts. Emily Landhill allows a smug smile to cross her face, confident in her assessment. If that wretched girl fails to appear, she thinks victory will naturally be hers. She leans back in her chair, addressing Kane and his companions with disdain. She mocks the absent girl, questioning why she would run away after simply failing to sell some items. Emily suggests the girl is so poor she struggles to eat daily, and that perhaps she found a patron who could spare a few silver coins, implying that was the only way she could have any value. Continuing her condescending speech, Emily offers a proposition. If Kane were to admit his judgment was flawed, she might consider acknowledging his foolishness. She then pointedly asks if he has misunderstood the situation in some way. He meets her gaze without hesitation, his own expression firm with conviction. He states plainly that the girl will absolutely be coming. Emily's confidence wavers as Kane adds that she will be bringing an unbelievably large sum of money with her. As if on cue, the doors burst open and the young girl rushes into the room, breathless. She apologizes profusely for her tardiness and for taking so long to bring the proceeds from sale. She stops before Kane, again apologizing for having borrowed his help. He simply tells her she made it in time and thanks her. From across the room, Emily glares, spitting the word trash under her breath. A wave of relief washes over the girl, and she smiles brightly, surprised that they actually came. She muses that the atmosphere feels somehow different than it did a month prior, unaware of Emily standing stiffly in the background. Her moment of relief is cut short as Emily steps forward, pointing an accusatory finger. She demands to know what the girl meant when she said she brought the proceeds. The girl looks up, startled by the sharp interrogation. The girl apologizes meekly, explaining that, no matter how she looked at them, the items were just junk. She confesses that they couldn't be sold. She continues her plea, explaining that she couldn't bring the money herself. With desperate eyes, she begs Emily, "Please, let me in." Emily can only stare back, utterly stunned in a silence by the incomprehensible request. She stares in utter disbelief as a wooden cart rumbles to a stop just beside her. Her shock deepens upon seeing the poor girl standing beside the cart, which is now piled high with sacks overflowing with money. The girl cheerfully announces that this is the profit she earned from selling the magical tools. The declaration renders Emily completely speechless, her mouth agape as she struggles to comprehend the sight. The girl continues with a triumphant laugh, explaining that with a little more time for auctions, she could have earned even more, but this was the absolute limit of what she could achieve in just 1 month. Her disbelief finally curdles into rage. Spotting Kane, she whirls on him, pointing an accusatory finger. She shouts his name, Adele, and demands to know what kind of foul play he was responsible for. He meets her fury with a calm smile, assuring her he did no such thing. He then poses a question directly to her. What would she say if he told her this was all the result of the girl's own gifted abilities? Emily Landhill's face contorts with rage and disbelief. She demands to know what Kane is talking about, questioning how he could have possibly earned such a large sum of money using the abilities of a girl she considers to be trash. Her angry questioning continues as she points accusingly at the frail girl standing beside Kane. She demands that he explain what kind of deal he struck with the girl, shouting his alias, Adele. The girl flinches under the scrutiny while Kane grits his teeth in frustration. He calmly refutes the accusation, stating with a slight smile that he did nothing at all. He clarifies that the girl handled everything herself, from the proper valuation of the magic tools to the price negotiations with the buyer. He adds that his only role was to escort her to a noble in the royal capital. This enrages Emily further. She points a finger directly at him, shouting that he must have used his status as a lord's son to force a sale on some weak, disadvantaged noble. The frail girl quickly speaks up in Kane's defense, arguing that a frontier noble like herself would never possess such influence. She pleads with Emily to stop making such baseless accusations, and Kane joins in, begging her to stop. Unmoved by their pleas, Emily crosses her arms defiantly. She challenges them, stating that if they don't believe her, she will summon the buyers to testify. She adds with a sneer that even she would be left speechless if it came to that. Kane simply watches her, his expression unreadable. As the confrontation unfolds, the girl, lit, thinks to herself that she knew this would happen. The reason is clear to her. It's because she is one of the heroines from the original work, the one who possesses the magic box. Her thoughts drift to the original story, recalling how Lit was an indispensable character. She could acquire magic tools, appraise them for equipment, and then use her special magic box to carry and manage tools of any size, making her an excellent companion for any journey. The memory fades, and the scene shifts to an earlier moment where Randall Baldus explains his strategy to Kane and Lit. He states that for people like them, dealing with someone like Lit, their only job is to prepare the stage for her to perform. He then details the specific steps of their plan. First, they brought Lit to their territory, where she was bathed and given clean clothes. Simultaneously, he had Kane write a letter. Randall notes that most nobles are blind to the value of such items, so he had Kane select a buyer in the royal capital who is not only knowledgeable, but would also be indebted to them, ensuring they could sell the magic tools for a high price. He concluded his instructions, explaining that the final step was for Lit to use her renowned negotiation skills, just as she does in the original story, to close the deal. The boy, meanwhile, was lost in a vision of immense wealth, realizing that with Lit's appraisal skills and Shiana's valuable magic tools, this was no longer a gamble, but a guaranteed victory. Elsewhere, Emily Landhill stared at the letter, her face pale with disbelief. She couldn't accept this outcome, muttering that it was a lie, even as she recalled the exact terms of the wager she had made. Her thoughts were interrupted as Adele presented a contract. Adele stated coolly that since Emily had lost, she would now become a servant, reminding her that she had already signed the document. Sharana, standing beside her, affirmed that they would ensure the promise was kept. She clenched her jaw in fury, whirling to face her guards. The noblewoman furiously declared that the contract was meaningless and utterly invalid. In response, Adele's hand moved to the hilt of her sword as she took a single, resolute step forward. The sheer pressure emanating from her caused the armored guards to recoil, their advance faltering. A shocked Emily, sensing the dangerous shift in the atmosphere, quickly commanded them to halt. She stood ready, her blade partially unsheathed and her eyes locked on the guards. Beside her, Sharana watched with a menacing grin. Adele's voice cut through the tension, calmly asking if they were truly prepared to fight. A young girl's face contorts in absolute terror, her eyes wide as she lets out a choked gasp. The source of her fear becomes apparent in another room, where Kane stands with a cold, impassive gaze. Before him, Emily Landhill has collapsed to the floor, questioning what is happening. The armored legs of her two knight escorts hang limply from above, their swords clattering to the ground below. Kane silently scoffs at the arrogance of these so-called wise men of the countryside. From her position on the ground, Emily looks up in horror at a terrifying sight. Looming over her are several shadowy figures with menacing, glowing eyes. She wonders why this boy possesses such monstrous attendants. He crouches down, his expression shifting to a placid smile. He addresses her directly as Lady Emilina, the Lord's daughter, and reminds her that she was the one who unjustly broke their contract. He then asks if she truly thought such an act would not be a major problem. As Emily trembles, clutching her dress, Lit steps forward with newfound boldness. She warns the noblewoman that her actions could very well cause diplomatic issues in the future. She then turns her fiery gaze upon the two knights, who now stand defeated. Lit shouts for them to get down and leave the room at once. Though they hesitate, the intimidated guards quickly agree. With the knights gone, the room's occupants are left standing in a tense formation. Emily is surrounded by Kane, Lit, and his formidable attendants, including a stern-faced butler. A deep blush spreads across Emily's face. Tears well in her eyes as she looks down, overcome with humiliation. The reason for her shame is revealed. She now stands in her undergarments. The butler swiftly removed her dress and now holds it, while Kane and Lit look on as the noblewoman is left exposed and mortified. The butler whirls on Kane, his face a mask of fury, demanding to know what kind of bet he made. He then orders Emily not to look away. Kane calmly interrupts, stating that he cannot have her being insubordinate, a point the butler seems to concede. The humiliation left Emily Landhill trembling and exposed. She had imagined a more satisfying outcome for herself, but the reality of her actions left a bitter taste, a pang of conscience she hadn't anticipated. Her distress deepened as she was confronted with the consequences. Because of her, Lit had nearly been sold off, and the life of a loyal attendant had been ruined. Lit stood silently, her gaze downcast, while the man's grim expression served as a testament to the damage done. The weight of it all settled upon Emily, her face contorting with shame and regret. Just as Kane prepared to demand the final act of contrition, a formal bow of apology on the floor, Lit suddenly rushed forward. "Wait, please wait," she called out, her voice pleading as she reached the doorway, trying to stop him. He turned, surprised by her intervention, and called out her name with concern. Beside him, Mina appeared, her expression unreadable. She questioned the logic of the situation, wondering aloud why Lit, the one who had suffered the most from Emily's actions, would be the one to step in and stop the apology. Lit offered a gentle, almost pitying smile. She explained that they were both girls of the same age, and seeing Emily in such a pathetic state was simply too much to bear. Emily looked up, a flicker of surprise in her eyes at the unexpected show of compassion. Her expression then shifted with startling speed. The gentle pity vanished, replaced by a cold, dark intensity. That's wrong, isn't it? She declared, her voice sharp. Lit reminded Kane that he had said the apology could happen anywhere, which meant she was the one who would designate the location, not him. The sudden ferocity in her tone left Kane utterly stunned, his face slack with disbelief. Even Mina seemed taken aback by the girl's abrupt transformation. She turned her piercing gaze back to the kneeling noblewoman. What do you think you're doing? Lit demanded. Try to get this over with by apologizing here on your own terms? Having fun. He could only stammer her name. Lit, as Emily stared up, her expression a mixture of shock and utter confusion at the turn of events. As Emily stared in disbelief, Lit's expression transformed. The timid girl vanished, replaced by someone with eyes lost in shadow and a chilling, knowing smile playing on her lips. A cheerful young woman with distinctive plaid hair clips leads Kane, Mina, Lit, and a burly man through a town street. She announces with a smile that she runs a stall just up ahead and will guide them there. Lit, blushing, peeks out shyly from behind the man's leg. As they proceed, she notices a commotion further down the street. Squinting, she wonders what is happening, then recognizes a figure in the distance, identifying her as Emelina-sama. The source of a disturbance becomes clear. 3 merchants are agitated. One angrily questions if the person they are facing has come to ruin their shop again. Another tries to de-escalate, urging his companion to just clean up quickly, but the first man insists they must wait. The woman with the plaid clips cheerfully calls out to Emilina Landhill, announcing their arrival. Emilina turns, her expression sour, remarking that something seems different from usual. Her demeanor shifting. She presents a document to the noblewoman. She states that, according to the contract Adele had Emilina sign at the mansion, she will be taking Lit. She then presents an ultimatum. Either Emilina prostrates herself on the ground in apology, or she will take the girl. Emelina's face pales with shock and humiliation. A painful memory flashes, Lit, trembling on the ground, clearly in distress. The vision fades, leaving Emilina frozen in the middle of the street as the surrounding townsfolk stare and murmur amongst themselves, their judgment palpable. Nearby, the burly man sweats, crossing his arms in disbelief and questioning if this is truly happening. Kane watches silently as the woman with the clips calls out Lit's name. Lit trembles, clutching her cloak tightly. After a moment of tense silence, Emilina, face flushed with shame, clenches her fists and concedes. She declares that it can't be helped and thrusts the contract back toward her challenger. Holding the document, the woman's expression becomes serious. She reads aloud that the contract for the exchange of the 2 individuals has no expiration date. Therefore, she announces, she is canceling today's decision to stop the unfair treatment of the merchants. Emilina can only stare, utterly speechless. She addresses the gathered merchants directly, assuring them that this is the end of the matter for now. However, she issues a stern warning. If they are ever treated so poorly again, she will not hesitate to force the perpetrator to prostrate themselves on the spot. In response to the threat, a terrified Emily Landhill flees, stammering that she will never do such a thing again. With the noblewoman gone, the girl with the plaid clips turns to Adele and the gruff man, apologizing for the trouble she caused. She then asks Adele if he was truly okay with how things were resolved, given that he was the one forced to kneel. He admits that he had hoped the merchants would receive an apology as well, not just him. Though he isn't fully satisfied, she explains her reasoning. She felt it was more effective to use the contract to place a restriction on Emily's future behavior, a sentiment with which the others seemed to agree. Changing the subject, Adele proposes a new venture. He suggests they could sell their advanced goods right here, noting that it would be quite profitable. With their newfound connections, he adds, they could even open a shop in the capital without any problems. His companion considers this, questioning if he intends to open a shop in a better location than their current one, using the funds and connections they've just secured. Adele confirms with a confident smile that he has already scouted a promising spot. Meanwhile, Mina approaches the lingering Emily Landhill. The witch declares that while the girl may have forgiven Emily, she has not, furious that her magical tools were belittled. She offers a small, metallic object to the noblewoman. She presents it as a token of apology, demanding that Emily praise the magic tool until she is satisfied. Emily takes the item, a beautifully designed bracelet, and is immediately captivated, calling it an unparalleled masterpiece with a powerful aura. As this exchange occurs, Adele's expression shifts to one of sudden, dawning horror. He recognizes the magic item. Emily eagerly fastens the bracelet to her wrist, marveling at its perfect fit. As she does, Mina thinks to herself that this is a bad development. Adele lunges forward, shouting for her to stop, but it's too late. The bracelet clicks shut. Ignoring Adele's frantic warnings, Emily Landhill snaps the ornate bracelet onto her wrist. A flicker of confusion crosses her face, while Mina watches from the side, a satisfied smirk confirming her intentions. From the street below, the onlookers, Adele, Mina, and 2 new companions, gaze up in shared bewilderment, wondering what has happened. The realization suddenly dawns on the young woman with plaid hair clips. She gasps in shock, exclaiming that Emily has actually put it on. She quickly explains that once equipped, that particular item strips the wearer of all their magical equipment. Her words prove true instantly. A horrified shriek tears from Emily's throat as her magically sustained attire vanishes, leaving her completely exposed. The girl with the clips admonishes her, declaring that it's not admirable to show off one's body with a magic tool. As Mina peeks out from under her hat with amusement, Adele can only stare, utterly speechless. A few days later, at the Reedrich territory, Kane contemplated the upcoming meeting. He wondered aloud what kind of merchant he was about to meet. His thoughts were interrupted by Emilina Landhill, who assured him that the person she was introducing was an excellent choice. She then questioned if he intended to retaliate against her, reminding him that their contract was still valid. Kane remained silent, knowing that, as far as she knew, it was still in effect. Following the tense exchange, Kane recalled the commotion with Emilina. He was certain Melchia, waiting at the gate, would soon understand the situation. He reflected on his actions since leaving the Landhill estate. He had systematically contacted exceptional merchants, negotiating with them to halt any commercial activity within the Landhill territory. His strategy involved having those same merchants provide information to Emilina, a move that led directly to this meeting. The thought of facing her directly made his stomach churn, even as he noticed her own irritation, believing he was resorting to some cheap trick. Just as he composed himself, a voice from the doorway announced that they had brought the merchant. An elven attendant stepped forward, thanking Kane for his visit. He introduced himself as Adele Reedrich, the son of the Lord. Kane politely dismissed the formality, noting that their lands were adjacent. Internally, he felt confident that this meeting would resolve the territory's economic issues. Emilina then presented the merchant she had brought. A cheerful young girl with distinctive X-clips in her hair stepped forward, introducing herself with a bright smile as Lit Malone and expressing her hope to work with them. The name and face struck both Kane and Emilina with the force of a physical blow, leaving them utterly speechless and wide-eyed with shock. As they stood frozen, the girl, Lit, responded to the stunned cry of her name. Yes, she asked cheerfully, waving slightly. Is something the matter, Adele-sama? She began to explain the situation. Adele, she said, had been looking for a merchant to operate in his territory. It was Emilina who had recommended her for the position, asking her to lend her aid. His mind reeled with the implications. He couldn't possibly refuse her. He tried to rationalize the situation, thinking that since this was a remote region and not the royal capital, it might be all right. Still, the anxiety was palpable. He had no idea what kind of disastrous flag would be triggered by having the game's heroine in his domain. As he struggled with his thoughts, Lit's voice cut through his worries. She stated that she had judged being close to Adele to be the most profitable course of action for her. With a bright, confident smile, she extended her hand, asking him to take it and seal their partnership. He closed his eyes for a moment, his decision made, and accepted her hand. Lit's smile widened as they shook, and she confidently told him to leave everything to her, boasting that she was the best in the city. In the background, Emilina watched the scene unfold with a satisfied smile. And so, despite a lingering sense of unease on Kane's part, Lit's new shop officially opened for business in the Reedrich territory. In the aftermath of the commotion with Emilina, a period of calm settled over the Reedrich territory. It was during this time that Lit opened her own shop. Initially, the local residents were hesitant, but she began sourcing unusual goods from the capital and the Landhill territory, gradually winning their trust and patronage. Thanks to the high quality of her merchandise and her shrewd business acumen, the number of customers steadily grew. Before long, her shop's reputation spread, and a great many people began to visit from outside the territory, drawn by the promise of her unique wares. Inside the now bustling establishment, Lit waves goodbye to a departing customer. As the bell on the door chimes, she wipes a bead of sweat from her brow, sighing that things have finally settled down. Just then, the door opens again, and she turns to welcome the new arrival. Adele stands just inside, a pleased smile on his face as he observes the thriving shop. He remarks on what a great success it is. Lit spots him and calls out his name in greeting. He approaches the counter and asks the young elf attendant if she has any sweets that Sharana might like, explaining he was just passing through. The attendant confirms they do and offers to bring them right away. He glances out at the street, reflecting on his walk through the town. He muses that since Lit opened her shop, the number of people visiting the territory has clearly increased. His words reach Lit, who looks at him with a soft, grateful expression. He turns back to her, stating that he wants to formally thank her. Because of her efforts, he explains, the lives of the people in this territory have become much richer. She becomes flustered at the praise, waving her hands dismissively. She insists it's not her doing at all, but rather Adele who deserves the credit. She explains that this territory and its surroundings are abundant with valuable medicinal herbs and dungeon relics, which she has been able to acquire. She continues, a blush rising on her cheeks, clarifying that she simply used those resources to negotiate with merchants from other territories, obtaining goods in exchange. Adele listens intently, murmuring her name. He then remarks that it's strange such a promising territory hadn't drawn any attention until now. His own words spark a chilling realization. This territory is fated to be destroyed within a few years. He wonders with a sudden dread if his interference has somehow lowered its prominence, inadvertently setting it on the path to ruin he remembers from the story. Lit leans closer, putting a finger to her lips as if sharing a secret. She explains that because the territory is so large and centrally located, it's easy to visit from anywhere. Then her tone shifts. She adds that for that very reason, there are countless destruction flags, far too many to count. Adele's eyes widen in shock at her statement. He remained momentarily stunned by her revelation. Lit, with a grateful expression, explained that she had come to find him because he had saved her life. As she spoke, another young woman with a checkered bandana on her head called out to him. But Lit's focus remained fixed, pressing on to ask what his plans were for the rest of the day. Her expression shifted to one of thoughtful surprise. She admitted that she had no particular plans herself, other than to look around town before heading back to her lodgings. Seizing the opportunity, a young man, standing nearby, approached Lit directly. With a hopeful tone, he suggested that if she was free, they could perhaps have a meal together. Lit appeared flustered by the unexpected invitation, her hands fidgeting nervously. Her face flushing crimson, Lit turned away from her suitor and looked directly at Adele. Clutching her sleeve, she quietly asked him if it would be a bad thing to do. Caught completely off guard by the question, Adele could only stare back, a blush rising on his own cheeks. A maid bursts into the room with a frantic apology, calling out to see if Adele is present. Inside, Adele looks up, her face flushed and breathing heavily, startled by the sudden intrusion. She quickly explains that she's glad to have found her, clarifying that someone named Baron-sama sent her. The maid then notices Adele's disheveled state and profuse sweating, apologizing for her appearance and suggesting it's best not to get too close. Adele, flustered, waves her hands dismissively, insisting that she's fine and that the maid should calm down. Having witnessed the scene, Lit Malone stares with wide, shocked eyes before turning away, muttering an apology as she makes a hasty exit. In the wake of her departure, Adele lets out a sigh, her cheeks still warm as she begins to straighten her rumpled shirt. After composing herself, she turns to Kane and suggests they return to their room, just as Lit is seen hurrying out of the shop in the background. Lit collapses to her knees outside, lamenting that what she just saw was completely against the rules. From the shop, the owner thanks her for the sweets and apologizes for the crowd, telling her to visit again when she has time. She walks away, dejected, once again having failed to invite Adele for a meal. She wonders aloud if she lacks charm, or if her style isn't as good as a magic tool user's. Behind her, the shopkeeper and another young man watch her go, with the latter quietly encouraging her to keep trying. Meanwhile, Kane and Adele walk through the town streets, accompanied by the man with the goatee. Kane remarks that the area has changed completely, with far more people around. Adele agrees, noting that the influx of travelers has boosted business for the local inns and shops. Their stroll is interrupted by a pair of cheerful locals. A woman calls out, mistaking Adele for someone named Shita, and asks if she's on a date with Adele, referring to Kane. Her male companion playfully asks for a date as well. Adele, completely flustered, begs them to stop teasing her. He turns to the blushing elf and apologizes for the situation. With a small smile, Kane then remarks that the people in this area are quite friendly, observing her reaction. He listens as the shopkeeper explains that when she and Kane first arrived, they felt a distinct barrier, a wall between themselves and the people of the demon territory. That barrier, she continues with a bright smile, has now vanished, allowing them to get along. She credits this entirely to Adele-sama, whose unwavering and equal treatment of everyone broke down the old divisions. Hearing these words, Adele's expression softens with gratitude. She thanks Adele-sama, adding that she and the real Kane are also truly thankful. Kane looks up at her, processing the moment and the unfamiliar name, Shita, that is now being associated with Adele. The peaceful atmosphere is suddenly shattered by shouts from down the street. Two men, former bandits, run towards them at full speed, waving their arms and calling out for Adele-sama and Shita-san. While walking through the town with Lit's mother, Kane is greeted by two familiar faces, Balt and Lang, now serving as town guards. The woman thanks them for their hard work patrolling the territory, and the men politely return the sentiment. One of them, however, glares at Kane, recalling how he was the one who took their money and left them behind. The other guard grins slyly, asking if Kane is on a date with Lit and teasing that they won't be left out this time. Kane remains unfazed by their antics. Meanwhile, their former leader, Randall Baldus, is a training ground. He observes that since his defeat at Kane's hands, the number of people enlisting in the guard has swelled, leaving him busy training the new recruits. Back in the street, the two guards enthusiastically tell Kane that thanks to the training facility he established, they have become significantly stronger. They point out their status improvements, showing a substantial level increase, and invite him to visit the training grounds again soon. His conversation concluded, Kane turns to Lit's mother, noting that because Lit's efforts have revitalized the town, they now have sufficient funds to allocate towards military preparations. He then offers to carry her bag for her. He accompanies her back to the residence, announcing his return. Lit's mother welcomes him home, addressing him formally as Adele-sama. Kane looks around, asking for Baron's whereabouts. In his place, Adele and Shirana appear. Adele thanks Kane for going out, but Shiana's attention is immediately captured by the bag in his hand. She rushes forward, excitedly asking if it's a present for her. Her assumption proves correct as she joyfully holds up a large, swirl-patterned lollipop. Adele scolds her for using Kane as an errand boy, but Shirana retorts that she didn't even know he was going out, deflecting the criticism with a cheerful excuse. She turns away, a smug grin spreading across her face as she admires the lollipop. She declares that unlike Kane, whose form has not changed in years, she is in her growth period, and the difference between them will only continue to widen. With a flourish, she strikes a playful pose, lollipop in hand, and asks what he thinks of her cute magic. Kane watches her, a look of weary resignation on his face. He thinks to himself that no matter how many years pass, the dynamic between the two of them never changes. His growth over the past few years was not merely physical. Kane's personal stats had also seen a marked improvement, reaching level 3. His magical aptitude in water and dark remained basic, but his physical skills in swordsmanship, gathering, and investigation had all advanced, bolstered by a significant increase in his loyalty. This was a stark contrast to Sharana, who had been at her maximum level from the very beginning. This development was not limited to him or the town's infrastructure. Under his influence, Lit Malone, Randall Baldus, and the former bandits now serving as soldiers had all seen their abilities raised to a new baseline. Kane considered this progress, knowing that a crisis could arise at any moment. Strengthening his allies was a welcome precaution, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he was waiting for a disaster that had yet to reveal itself. A surge of power flows through Adele, his status shifting before his eyes. He has advanced to level 3, his magical affinity for water increasing. Yet, a wave of frustration washes over him as he laments that for all his inherent weakness, he has only gained a single level and a meager increase in his magical abilities. He reflects on the years of painstaking effort, the blood-like toil he endured, all for a single point of progress. In stark contrast, he thinks of Melchia, who seemed to advance effortlessly just by living her life. The truth of his situation settles in his mind. The debuff placed upon him is overwhelmingly powerful. He feels a pang of guilt, realizing that Melchia's own progress is now tied to his. A grim thought surfaces. If things continue this way, not only will his domain fall to ruin, but he alone might face death. His grim reverie is broken by the sharp voice of the elf, Adele, who demands to know if he is paying attention. At the same time, a young girl with bright eyes grabs his arm, her expression fierce. She proclaims that should any danger befall her master, she will not hesitate to incinerate the foe with her magic. She then explains her logic with a disarmingly sweet smile, holding up a lollipop. In essence, she states, the Hanako Tachi will be dedicated to Adele's cause, a purpose for which the Hiyori Hitori exists. Her proposal is met with a stern rebuke from Adele Reedrich, who steps forward to intervene. He declares her assistance unnecessary, vowing that he alone will protect the young master. The elf, Adele, calmly counters that some expenditures are unavoidable, but Reedrich remains firm, accusing them both of coddling the boy. The tension is broken when a kind-faced maid and the elf Adele pull the young boy into a warm embrace. The maid suggests that it would be fine for all of them to protect him together, a sentiment with which the elf wholeheartedly agrees, drawing the smaller girl into the group hug. Caught in the moment, the young girl's eyes widen, sparkling with a newfound emotion as a blush spreads across her cheeks. He, too, feels the warmth of their support, a faint blush on his face as a small smile forms. A quiet realization dawns on him. Even if he is the weakest in this moment, he is also the strongest. As the moment passes, the three attendants stand together. The maid sighs with a gentle smile, remarking that it cannot be helped. Adele Reedrich, arms crossed, turns away with a huff, while the young girl mirrors his posture with a pout, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. Within a grand, ornate hall, the head butler, Baron, approaches young Adele. He bows his head slightly, offering an apology for his tardiness. He looks on with a gentle smile, reflecting on how peaceful the last few years have been. His countermeasures against the so-called death flags are proceeding smoothly. He feels confident that if this tranquility holds, there will be no problems until the main story begins. From a distance, his loyal attendants watch over him. But in that moment, somewhere else entirely, a young man with light hair suddenly gasps for air. He stumbles violently, his hand slapping against a dark wall as he begins to collapse. He staggers forward, his body weak and unsteady. A chilling thought crosses his mind. This profound quiet feels unnatural, like the calm before a terrible storm. Clutching his head in disorientation, he struggles to focus his blurry vision. He wonders aloud, his voice weak, where he could possibly be. His strength gives out completely, and he falls to his knees. A wave of hunger pangs hits him as he realizes he had no way of knowing this would happen. Meanwhile, back in the summit hall, Baron and Adele's female elf attendant present the boy with a large bouquet of flowers. The butler asks which ones he would like to decorate the study with, prompting a light-hearted rebuke from the elf, who questions why they would bother him with such a trivial matter. While Kane is engrossed in a book, a voice suddenly calls out for Adele-sama, announcing an intrusion. The boy looks up from his reading, startled by the abrupt interruption. A guard stands at the doorway, explaining that while on patrol, he found a collapsed child. He brought the child back, but reports that his condition is strange and asks Kane for instructions. Kane, puzzled, questions what he means by strange. The guard elaborates that he has brought the individual to the mansion gate, and that the person is muttering something about being the Demon King. At this, Kane's eyes widen in utter shock. His mind races, recalling the lore of the game, Ardle's Miracle. He remembers the Demon King, a being of immense power with golden hair and black horns, the final obstacle he once defeated. A dreadful realization dawns on him. The very Demon King he was meant to fight has somehow appeared in his domain, a possibility that should be unthinkable. Elsewhere, Shirana cheerfully notes that she has already reached her maximum level. Adele Riederich, however, tempers her enthusiasm, pointing out that Kane and Randolph are still developing and that their territory's military preparations are far from complete. Returning to the present, the guard urgently reports that the stranger is in no state to fight and asks Kane how to handle the situation. Kane, his expression grim, processes the news and asks for confirmation that the boy had collapsed. He goes to the courtyard to see for himself. The guard is kneeling beside a slumped figure, explaining that he's never seen the person in their territory before. Kane looks down at the stranger, who groans weakly, and asks if he is all right. The collapsed individual realizes he is weaker than he had anticipated, unable to even stand on his own 2 feet. A hand gently rests on his head. The young man looks up, confused by the gesture, wondering if this small child could truly be the demon king he's heard of. He looks up at Kane, pale and exhausted with a hand to his forehead, and asks weakly if he brought anything to eat. Kane can only stare back, his expression a mixture of bewilderment and concern. The young man remained collapsed on the ground as the guards panicked over what to do with him. Kane, unfazed, silenced their bickering and gave a clear order. Take the stranger to the dining hall and feed him. He then instructed one of the men to have Melchia bring food for them both, an order the guard quickly accepted. He then approached the stranger himself, helping him to his feet. Can you stand? Kane asked, offering his shoulder for support. The young man could only manage a weak groan in response, leaving Kane to ponder just what sort of situation this was. Leading him towards the dining hall, he reassured the stranger that a maid was already preparing a meal and that he would be able to eat shortly. The man gratefully accepted a piece of fruit, expressing his thanks and noting that his benefactor was human. Kane watched him, his mind racing. The man's pointed ears were unmistakable. He was a member of the demon race. Still, the claim of being the demon king felt suspicious. Kane resolved to first ascertain the stranger's true nature and the reason for his sudden appearance. Seated at a table laden with food, the stranger stared in wonder. Kane formally introduced himself as Adele Reed-Rich, son of a local lord. The young man, in turn, expressed his profound gratitude for being saved. He then asked for the stranger's name. The young man's demeanor shifted, a confident smile spreading across his face as he declared himself to be Almighty Guardable, the demon king. The name and title struck Kane silent. This person bore no resemblance to the character he remembered from the game. Adele internally refutes the idea of being the demon king from the original story. He reasons that not only is the name different, but he is a completely different person. He recalls collapsing alone and being asked about his family, concluding that there is simply no way he could be the demon king. A nearby guard, overhearing the conversation, suggests to Adele that the man claiming to be the demon king might have a reason for doing so, perhaps as a tactic to draw out information. The guard then asks what became of the demon king's subordinates when he collapsed from hunger. The man, Almighty Guardable, calmly peels a banana and explains his situation. He states that when he revived, there was no one else around. With no other choice, he began wandering in search of food, which eventually led him to this territory. Hearing this, the guard remarks on the disloyalty of Almighty's supposed subordinates. Adele, meanwhile, lets out a weary sigh, overwhelmed by how complicated the situation has become. Almighty laments that if only he had food immediately after reviving, he could have demonstrated his true power. As he speaks, Adele watches him, a strange sense of familiarity washing over him. He wonders why this person, who has suddenly become so talkative, feels so recognizable. He suddenly strikes a dramatic pose, hand covering one eye. Almighty declares that he pities the humans of the city, now trembling in a vortex of fear. He proclaims that this is the whim of fate, and that the time to unleash his true power will eventually come. A jolt runs through Adele. The sense of déjà vu sharpens into a clear understanding. He knows where this feeling comes from, a memory from his previous life. The realization crashes down on him with overwhelming force. Almighty's dramatic speech and gestures are identical to his own embarrassing behavior during his 8th grader syndrome phase. A flashback confirms it, showing his past self in a similar pose. Mortified, Adele screams internally for Almighty to stop, finally understanding that this man isn't the demon king, but just an eccentric with a flair for the dramatic. Almighty continues his performance, admitting he's just getting into the mood of being the demon king, calling himself a Chinibi patient. He muses that if the population grows and he finds good food, his mental state will recover before he perishes. Adele can only clutch his head, drowning in secondhand embarrassment. Just then, Melchia enters the room carrying a tray. She cheerfully announces that she has brought food for Adele and their guest. Believing something easy on the stomach would be best, she has prepared porridge for them. She places a plate of food before Almighty, politely excusing herself. Adele, observing the situation, feels a wave of secondhand embarrassment wash over him, thinking his heart can't take much more. He thanks Melchia and tells her he will handle things from here. She turns to Adele with a gentle smile and agrees. Her compliance, however, is interrupted by Almighty's sharp observation. He looks her over with a knowing smirk, declaring her to be a member of the demon race. The sudden accusation causes Melchia's eyes to widen in shock. She stands frozen in the middle of the room, utterly bewildered by the claim. She can only stammer in confusion as Adele calls out her name. Concern. Her composure shattered, she turns and hurries from the room, offering a flustered apology as she departs. Adele watches her go, calling after her to ask what's wrong. She comes to a stop just outside the door, standing silently with her head bowed. Back at the table, Almaty muses on her sudden departure, concluding with satisfaction that she must have been overwhelmed by his majestic presence. Melchior watches from a distance, flustered and wondering why the Demon King is in her home. At the dining table, the bandaged Almaty Guardable takes a bite of food and his eyes widen in delight. He exclaims that the simple meal is incredibly delicious, a flavor he has never experienced before. Across from him, Adele proudly states that Melchior's cooking is the best in the entire domain. He continues to eat, musing that it's unexpected for a demon to enjoy food made by humans. The thought of poison crosses his mind, but he dismisses it, reasoning that Melchior is not the type of person to resort to such tactics. He concludes that he must simply be of a cowardly nature to even entertain the idea. Adele listens, remarking that he had always thought of demons as beings who paid humans no mind, but Almaty is proving to be quite different from his expectations. With his arms crossed, Almaty compliments the territory, noting the vibrant town he passed through on his way to the mansion and praising the delicious food. Adele seems slightly flustered by the unexpected praise. He then focuses his attention on Adele, expressing his admiration for the boy's management skills and his way of evaluating people based on ability rather than race. Extending a hand, Almaty states that he wants to see just how far Adele's path will lead. Almaty continues, explaining that while he had intended to make them an obstacle to his world conquest, he has changed his mind. Instead, he declares with a smile, his first act will be to destroy this domain to sate his hunger. He casually asks if Adele has any objection to him destroying the land the boy seems to like. Adele is struck by a sudden, chilling realization. The fact that demons can live peacefully in this town is something he, as the protagonist, was meant to rectify. In the game's original scenario, demons and humans were set up as natural adversaries. He then recalls that Almaty's family was never mentioned in the story. His eyes widen in horror as the pieces connect. Could Almaty have been driven to this remote place as a result of persecution? If that were true, it was possible he lost his parents because of it. The strange pronouncements suddenly make sense. Adele realizes that Almaty isn't truly a demon bent on destruction. He is merely protecting his own spirit by convincing himself of this role, a defense mechanism against the past where he was forced to fight humans. Overwhelmed by the tragic implication, Adele bursts into tears. Almaty, taken aback, asks if he was that frightened by his words. Misunderstanding the boy's tears, he offers him a drink and says he can stay in the mansion as long as he likes. Adele, still weeping, quietly accepts. He decided that once their course was set, they should report to the two individuals they needed to inform. With that settled, they made their way to the Royal Guard training grounds, the place they would now call home. As they arrived, Almaty stepped forward with a confident smile, introducing himself. He mentioned that Adele had spoken to the man before them and expressed his pleasure at finally making his acquaintance. The man he addressed was Randolph, who greeted Adele warmly and asked what brought him to the grounds. As Adele responded, Almaty stood by, silently processing the fact that their household had just grown by one more person. He looked around the training yard with disdain, internally questioning its purpose. To him, it seemed little more than a recreational facility for people to play with swords. Adele attempted to explain that it was a proper training ground, but Almaty was dismissive. He declared that such a grand stage was entirely unnecessary for someone of his caliber. His arrogant words left Adele momentarily speechless, only able to stammer his companion's name. The remark, however, did not go unnoticed. Randolph turned, his expression hardening as he demanded, "What did you just say, kid?" He acknowledged that while some trainees might not be taking it seriously, the grounds were no place for such a dismissive attitude. Almaty simply smirked, retorting that since he was only there to kill time, it hardly mattered. His flippant response seemed to be the final straw. A flicker of interest crossed Randolph's face as he considered the boy's audacity. He then crossed his arms and declared he would accept the challenge, eager to see if the boy's swordsmanship was as sharp as his tongue. Adele is aghast. He had only come to report on Almaty's situation, but it has escalated into a public confrontation. Behind him, one of the bandits laments that their captain is doing this for their sake. The bandit leader, Randall Baldus, holds a wooden practice sword and addresses Adele directly. He declares that while he has things he'd like to say to the boy, he will not stand by silently while his companions are mocked. In response to the challenge, Almaty Guardable steps forward. He claps his hands together, noting that if a duel is to happen, a proper weapon is needed. From thin air, he materializes a massive, ornate black sword, offering it to his would-be opponent as the onlookers stare in disbelief. Randolph is stunned, demanding to know where such a blade came from. Adele's shock is even greater. His mind flashes back as he recognizes the weapon. It is an exact replica of the strongest holy sword he had designed in a notebook during his middle school years in a past life. His initial surprise hardens into grim determination. Randolph's eyes narrow as he focuses intently on his new adversary. Seeing the situation escalating dangerously, Adele quickly places a hand on Almaty's shoulder. He urges him to wait, protesting that even for a practice match, using a real sword is going too far. He then proposes the terms for the duel. He suggests that since someone could get hurt, they should use the wooden sword, and the match will conclude the moment one combatant is incapacitated or loses the will to fight. Almaty listens, his gaze falling upon the practice weapon. With the rules established, Adele stands between the two men, raises his hand, and declares with a loud voice, "Begin." The surrounding bandits erupt in cheers for their captain, Randolph. They boast that he is a former royal knight and a first-rate swordsman. Adele watches them, thinking to himself about the obvious, overwhelming difference in power between the two combatants. As the duel starts, Randolph charges forward, confident he can adjust his strength accordingly. In a flash, Almaty meets the attack, his black blade connecting with the wooden sword and instantly shattering it into splinters. The sheer force of the impact leaves the onlooker stunned. Randolph's men cry out in disbelief, unable to comprehend how their leader's sword was stopped with just one hand. As fragments of the broken sword fly through the air, he casually remarks that Randolph possesses some skill with a longsword. However, with a condescending smile, he dismisses it as naive. Before Randolph can react to the insult, Almaty closes the distance in an instant, seizing the bandit leader's wrist with an iron grip. The larger man can only stare, utterly outmaneuvered. The duel ends abruptly. Randolph is thrown to the ground, which cracks and shatters from the force of the impact. He looks up from the crater, dazed, and asks what just happened, unable to believe he was defeated so easily. Witnessing this overwhelming display of power, a cold thought grips Adele. He begins to wonder if he's made a terrible mistake by inviting such a monstrously powerful individual into his home, realizing he must now retract his earlier accusation of Almaty being a mere thug. Almaty turns his attention from the defeated bandit, a serene smile on his face as he addresses Adele. He tells the boy to be grateful. He then adds that since Adele claimed to be injured, he will show mercy and go easy on him, a statement that carries an unsettling weight. Standing amidst a crater of shattered stone, Almaty, guardable, looks down at Adele. He tells the boy to be grateful, as he had held back his strength. Below, Adele stares up, his face a mask of shock and terror at the overwhelming display of power. He breaks into a cold sweat, his mind reeling. The casual ease with which this man not only overwhelmed the formidable Randolph, but also pulverized the very ground with a mere wooden sword was incomprehensible. Almaty then demands to know who Adele is and his true purpose for being there. When Adele remains silent, Almaty declares his own objective, to eat the delicious food at Adele's home and enjoy life to the fullest. He points dramatically, leaving Adele utterly baffled by the absurd pronouncement. Following this bizarre claim, he throws an arm around Adele's shoulders, cheerfully announcing that he will be living in the mansion starting today. He introduces himself as Almaty, the king of the demon race, and states that it would be an honor for Adele to walk alongside him. The boy can only stare, dumbfounded. Inside the mansion, before the assembled staff, the young elf attendant exclaims in disbelief, questioning if he is truly the demon king. Almaty confirms it, gesturing to Adele as the little demon lord. Melchia quickly interjects, advising everyone to disregard his claims for the time being. Baron, the head butler, then addresses Adele directly. He calmly states that he will prepare a room for their new guest, acknowledging that the matter seems to have already been decided. Adele looks up at him, his expression tense. Suddenly, Almaty grabs Adele, loudly declaring that he'll just take Adele's room if they are to be roommates. Adele angrily retorts that he will be the one to decide. Internally, however, the boy recognizes the immense power Almaty holds and realizes he must be careful not to provoke him, lest his head be crushed. The head butler steps in, calmly informing Almaty that he will guide him to his room. Baron hopes that as long as their guest's only purpose is to stay, no major problems will arise. Almaty simply agrees. As they depart, Melchia turns to Adele, her expression filled with worry. She asks if he is truly all right with this new arrangement. The elf attendant, Adele Reedrich, stands by, sharing her concern. He looks up, lost in thought. It's only natural, he considers, that Melchia and the others would have a subtle reaction to someone suddenly appearing and claiming to be the Demon King. But as an orphan, he reminds himself, he has nowhere else to go. Amidst the household's unease, the maid Melchia watched with a troubled smile. She mused that while some might find his words concerning, she believed in Adele. If he was the one being looked after, then everything would be fine. He, however, was calmly discussing the situation with Baron. The head butler noted that Randolph had been defeated at the training grounds and questioned if housing Almaty wasn't dangerous. Adele conceded the point, but explained there was merit in keeping their new guest close to monitor his actions, adding that he had dealt with dangerous individuals before. He then addressed his staff directly, acknowledging that Almaty was certainly a dangerous individual, but reassuring them to consult with him if anything happened. With a confident smile, he declared that he would manage to control the situation, earning a simple affirmation from Melchia and his elven attendant, Adele Reedrich. Despite the master's confidence, his attendant was deeply troubled as he walked away. The thought of the Demon King residing in their mansion was too much to bear. He lamented not consulting with Adele sooner, but grimly concluded that it was now too late. His mind raced with a dreadful realization. The war between humans and the demon race might be imminent. The thought of such a conflict brought tears to Melchia's eyes. She voiced her fear that if war broke out, she and the other non-human staff would be forced to fight against their human master, Adele. As she spoke, Adele Riedrich clenched his fist in silent frustration. He turned to her, explaining his grim theory. He speculated that if the Demon King had truly come to this territory, it was likely with the objective of recruiting them as combatants for the coming war. His resolve, however, was unshakable. A memory of Adele saving his dying mother flashed through his mind. He declared fiercely that he would never leave Adele's side, for it was Adele, King, who had saved them, not the Demon King. He would never obey such a being. He reaffirmed his singular loyalty, thinking that Adele was the only one to whom they would ever pledge allegiance. If Adele intended to act against the Demon King, he was prepared to go as far as assassination. As this dark thought crossed his mind, Melchia placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Unbeknownst to them, their emotional exchange was being watched. From down the hall, Almaty Gardable stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable as he silently observed the two servants.